My wife got back in shape and decided she could do better than me, so she filed for divorce but quickly regretted it. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. What's up everyone? It's Dave here. Buckle up because my life turned into a wild mess not long ago. I'm 34, just your average warehouse manager living in Columbus. My life wasn't flashy, but it was steady. I had a good job, a nice house, and I was married to Carla. We'd been together for 5 years, married for 3, and I thought we had a decent thing going. Sure, we weren't that lovey-dovey couple from TV, but we made it work. Bills got paid, we had our date nights, and the occasional argument was just normal marriage stuff, or so I thought. About 6 months ago, Carla decided to go on a big fitness journey. It came out of nowhere, but I was on board. She joined this upscale gym downtown that honestly looked more like a spa than a gym. She got herself a personal trainer, Justin, and suddenly started talking about meal prep, macros, and detox plans. I didn't mind. In fact, I encouraged her. I mean, everyone deserves to feel good about themselves, right? Plus, I figured it was just a phase, like her short-lived knitting hobby or that time she got into tarot cards. At first, I even pitched in to help her. I started taking on more of the chores, dishes, laundry, groceries, so she'd have more time to focus on her workouts. I thought it was a way to show her I cared, but slowly, things started to shift, and not in a good way. The more weight Carla lost, the bigger her ego grew. She became obsessed with her reflection, spending hours in front of the mirror tweaking her gym outfits or snapping the perfect progress pic for Instagram. She wasn't just doing this for herself, she wanted an audience. I remember this one time when I suggested we watch a movie together. It was a Friday night, and I thought we could relax like old times. She scoffed. Dave, I don't have time to sit around. I have goals to crush. Goals? What goals? We weren't talking about running a marathon or climbing Mount Everest. She was just lifting weights and drinking green sludge. But whatever, I shrugged it off. Maybe I was being the unreasonable one. Then came the morning. It started like any other. I was half asleep, nursing my coffee before heading to work, while Carla was downing her usual kale spinach disaster smoothie. She was dressed in her workout gear, scrolling through her phone like her life depended on it. Out of nowhere, she says, "I deserve more in life." I looked up, still groggy. Huh? More of what? She put her smoothie down and stared at me, all serious. This marriage is holding me back, Dave. I'm filing for divorce. I swear I thought it was a joke. I even laughed, thinking she was messing with me. But she wasn't laughing. Her face was stone cold. "I've outgrown this," she said, like I was some outdated piece of furniture she was ready to toss. You wouldn't understand. I sat there, completely blindsided. My wife, the woman I'd shared years of my life with, just dropped this on me like it was no big deal. I tried to process her words, but all I could feel was this mix of shock and anger boiling in my chest. "What do you mean you've outgrown this?" "Outgrown what?" She sighed, like I was a child asking too many questions. "Dave, I've been working on myself, trying to be the best version of me. And frankly, this life doesn't match my potential anymore. I want more than this house, this routine, this you." Her words hit me. She didn't even sugarcoat it. I was part of the problem in her eyes. The life we'd built together wasn't good enough for her anymore. She grabbed her gym bag and walked out the door without so much as a goodbye. I sat there, staring at the half-empty glass of green sludge she left behind, wondering what the hell just happened. That day at work was a blur. I went through the motions, but my mind was stuck on Carla. Was this real? Was she actually leaving me? We'd had arguments before, sure, but divorce? It felt so sudden, so calculated. And the way she said it, like she'd been rehearsing this speech for weeks, made it clear she'd already made up her mind. Over the next few days, the cracks in our marriage became glaringly obvious. She barely spoke to me unless it was about dividing up the house or setting up mediation. She started staying out late, claiming she was at the gym or with friends. Her phone was glued to her hand, and her Instagram was blowing up with selfies and captions like, "New chapter, who dis?" and "Living my best life." Every post was a slap in the face, a reminder that she'd already moved on mentally, even if the papers weren't signed yet. One night, while scrolling through my own social media, I noticed she'd deleted every picture of us. Wedding photos? Gone. Anniversary posts? Erased. It was like I'd been scrubbed from her life entirely. Meanwhile, her new posts were racking up likes and comments from people hyping her up. "You're glowing! Such an inspiration." It made me sick. None of these people knew the real Carla, or what she was putting me through. Another night, I overheard her on the phone while I was getting ready for work. She was in the kitchen, talking to someone in that fake, sugary voice she used when she wanted something. Yeah, I just feel so free now, she said. I'm finally doing what makes me happy. She paused, then giggled. He doesn't even get it. He's stuck in the past. That was the moment it hit me. Carla wasn't just leaving me. She was reinventing herself, and I was the anchor she was cutting loose. But here's the thing. I'm not the kind of guy to just roll over and take it. She thought she could steamroll me and walk away with everything, but she was in for a rude awakening. This was only the beginning, and if Carla wanted a fight, she'd get one. But wait, it gets worse. One afternoon, I'm grabbing lunch at this cafe near work. I'm minding my business, scrolling through my phone, when I overhear these two dudes at the next table. They're talking about some fitness babe they found online. I didn't pay much attention until one of them said her name, Carla. My stomach dropped. They were laughing, talking about how she had some premium content she was promoting. At first, I thought, no way, not Carla. But then one of them showed her Instagram on his phone. It was her, my Carla. They went on about how she'd started teasing an OnlyFans account, posting links in her bio like, for the real workouts. My blood boiled. This wasn't just some fitness phase. She was using her newfound freedom to become a full-blown thirst trap for money. When I got home, I confronted her. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. Carla, I said, trying to keep my cool. What the hell is this OnlyFans thing I'm hearing about? She looked up, completely unfazed. It's my body, Dave, my choice, and it's none of your business anymore. I couldn't believe her nerve. None of my business? We're still married. You're out here selling yourself on the internet while I'm trying to hold our lives together. She rolled her eyes, like I was some outdated fossil who just didn't get it. It's not selling myself. It's content creation. Plenty of people do it. Besides, it's not like you're paying my bills anymore. That's when it hit me. Carla didn't just want a divorce. She wanted a whole new life. One where she was the star, the main character, and I was just some extra she'd written off. She wasn't embarrassed or apologetic. If anything, she was proud, like she'd finally found her true calling as an online spectacle. Over the next few weeks, her antics escalated. She started dressing like she was auditioning for a reality show. Tight dresses, sky-high heels, makeup caked on like frosting. Every time she walked out the door, she looked like she was heading to some red carpet event, not the grocery store. And the captions? They got worse. Living my truth. No more holding back. And the one that made me want to throw my phone. She's not a wife anymore. She's a force of nature. The audacity. While Carla was out playing celebrity, I was stuck dealing with the fallout. Lawyers, paperwork, etc. But Carla wasn't as untouchable as she thought. My lawyer, Steve, absolute legend, had been doing some digging. Turns out she's been seeing a gold digger. But with a gym membership, I think you could guess whom I'm talking about. Stay tuned, folks. Things are about to get messy. I'll update you ASAP. Update 1. What's up again, Reddit? It's Dave, your favorite soon-to-be divorced dude with a front row seat to my ex's drama-fueled glow-up disaster. If you've been keeping up, you know my wife Carla decided she was too good for this life, left me high and dry, and has been parading around town like she's some fitness celebrity. But let's talk about the guy who's been fueling this whole mess. Justin. Yep, her personal trainer. Real original, right? The second I heard his name, I knew this wasn't just some innocent trainer-client relationship. Justin was the type of guy you'd expect to see on a reality dating show. Shredded, spray-tanned, and about as deep as a puddle. He was all charm, muscles, and smirks. Like he walked out of a bad rom-com. Carla wasn't subtle about their connection either. One day she strutted in the house after her workout, practically glowing. Justin says I'm the strongest I've ever been, she bragged, not even looking at me. Yeah, Carla, I'm sure Justin also told you he's never trained anyone like you before, because that's his script. A few weeks later, she stopped pretending it was just workouts. She started dropping his name in casual conversations. Justin's taking me to this new vegan restaurant. Or, Justin said this protein powder is life-changing. Meanwhile, I'm standing there like, do I look like I care? But Carla wasn't just name-dropping. She was flaunting him like he was her prize. Word spread fast. Friends started texting me with sightings of Carla and Justin all over town. They were holding hands, laughing, and acting like some Instagram couple of the year. Carla didn't even try to hide it. One night, she came home, bold as ever, and said, just so you know, Justin and I are dating now. I think it's time you accept that. Oh, I accepted it, all right. Accepted that my wife had turned into a full-blown caricature of entitlement. She'd already mentally divorced me. So what did it matter to her if she added a public affair to her resume? The more I learned about Justin, the more my blood boiled. He wasn't just your average gym bro. This guy had a history. My lawyer, Steve, who deserves a damn medal at this point, did some digging and found out Justin had pulled this stunt before. Twice, actually. He had a pattern. Find a married woman, pump her up with compliments and validation, and encourage her to leave her husband. Then, once the dust settled and the money wasn't flowing, he'd vanish like Houdini. Justin was a professional homewrecker. It wasn't love, it was a hustle. He hyped these women up, made them feel invincible, and rode their wave until it wasn't convenient anymore. And Carla? She was the perfect mark. She craved attention and validation like a fish craves water. Justin had her wrapped around his finger, and she didn't even see it. The worst part was how smug he was about it. I heard from mutual acquaintances that Justin was already talking about their big plans. He apparently told someone, once the divorce is finalized, Carla and I are going to build an empire. Empire? Dude, you're a trainer, not a tech mogul. But sure, dream big. Justin wasn't just banking on Carla's money. He was banking on my money. Carla was demanding half my savings, spousal support, and even trying to take the house. She thought she could waltz into court, play the victim, and walk away with a golden ticket for her and Justin's new life. Little did she know, my lawyer had receipts, and I wasn't about to roll over. Let me paint you a picture of what Carla and Justin looked like as a couple. Imagine a guy who only owns tank tops, standing next to a woman who suddenly thinks she's a Kardashian. They were all over social media, posing in front of fancy cars, not theirs, and tagging themselves at expensive restaurants. I'm guessing Carla was footing the bill. It was like they were trying to scream, "Look at us, we're winning!" But to anyone with half a brain, it was clear they were overcompensating. Their relationship wasn't without cracks, though. Justin's over-the-top personality started to clash with Carla's growing diva complex. One night, I heard her on the phone in the kitchen, arguing with someone. "I don't care what your exes said about you, Justin. You're with me now, and I deserve better than your baggage." I didn't catch the rest, but it was enough to tell me their little fantasy wasn't as perfect as they wanted everyone to believe. As much as it pissed me off, there was something oddly satisfying about watching Carla go all in on Justin. She'd bet everything on this guy, thinking he was her ticket to a better life, and it was only a matter of time before the house of cards came crashing down. My lawyer and I were making sure of that. After mediation, Carla's confidence took a hit. She walked into that room acting like Beyoncé and walked out looking like a deer in headlights. It was beautiful. Justin, her ever-loyal hype man, didn't even try to comfort her. He just sulked behind her, scrolling on his phone. That was my first clue that their little empire wasn't as solid as Carla wanted everyone to believe. But let's rewind a bit. Mediation wasn't just a setback for Carla. It was a disaster. She thought she was going to come in, cry a little, and walk out with the house, half my savings, and spousal support. Carla's lawyer painted this picture of her as the underappreciated wife who sacrificed everything for my mediocre dreams. You know, mediocre dreams? I've been working my ass off at this warehouse job for years. Steve, my lawyer, was ready. He had spreadsheets, screenshots, and even credit card statements to back me up. Carla had been burning through our joint account for months before she filed for divorce. We're talking luxury spa days, designer clothes, and $200 dinners, while I was eating leftovers and trying to figure out what went wrong. Steve made sure the court saw every penny she wasted. Then came Justin's skeletons, his past affairs, his pattern of sweet-talking married women, and how he always bailed when the money didn't flow like he expected. The cherry on top? Steve found messages from one of Justin's exes, warning Carla to be careful. Of course, Carla didn't listen. She thought she was different. Justin's smirk was gone, too. In fact, he looked downright uncomfortable. He probably realized his little scam was unraveling in real time. Carla tried to defend him, saying, "Justin isn't like that anymore." But the evidence was stacked against them. The judge wasn't buying their act. By the end of the session, it was clear Carla wasn't going to walk away with the fortune she thought she'd get. Justin? He looked like he was already planning his exit strategy. After mediation, Carla started acting off. She wasn't as smug anymore. She still tried to post her motivational nonsense on Instagram, but the captions got desperate. Instead of living my best life, it was stuff like, growth isn't always easy, but it's worth it. Yeah, sure, Carla. Keep telling yourself that. Justin, on the other hand, was showing his true colors. He was still around, but he wasn't as present as Carla made him out to be. He started skipping out on their public appearances. No more hand-holding at fancy restaurants or couple goals gym pics. Word got around that he was already flirting with one of his other clients, a younger woman who apparently didn't come with Carla's baggage. Typical. One night, Carla came home late. I was still living in the house with her at the time, because legally I couldn't kick her out, and she stumbled in looking absolutely drained. I didn't say a word. I just sat there on the couch, watching her. She plopped her designer bag on the counter and sighed dramatically, like she wanted me to ask what was wrong. But I wasn't playing that game. I just went to my room. The next morning, Carla tried to act like everything was fine. She walked around the kitchen, making one of her kale smoothies, but her usual smugness was gone. Justin's been busy with his clients, she said, out of nowhere. I didn't respond. I knew she wanted me to bite, to ask about him, but I wasn't giving her the satisfaction. A week later, the real drama started. I got a call from Steve. Apparently, Carla had filed some last-minute paperwork, trying to claim more assets. She wanted emotional compensation for the stress I'd caused her during the marriage. Yes, you read that right. Carla thought she could get more money by blaming me for her midlife crisis. I couldn't believe the audacity. Steve, being the legend that he is, had already prepared for this nonsense. He filed a countersuit, showing how Carla had drained our accounts and emotionally manipulated the situation to her advantage. He even included her Instagram posts as evidence. The captions alone were gold, proof that she wasn't some stressed-out victim, but a self-absorbed diva living her best life at my expense. Around this time, Justin officially went MIA. He stopped showing up to their gym sessions, stopped answering her calls, and even blocked her on Instagram. Yes, blocked. Carla was losing it. I could hear her pacing around the house, calling him over and over. Justin, call me back. We need to talk. She sounded desperate, and honestly, it was satisfying. Eventually, one of her friends spilled the tea. Justin had moved on to another client, someone younger, flashier, and most importantly, not tied up in a messy divorce. Carla was devastated. She tried to play it cool, posting cryptic quotes like, "Sometimes people aren't who they seem, and you can't build an empire with someone who's playing games." But everyone knew what had happened. Her perfect man had bailed the second things got tough. This was when Carla's entitlement really started to crumble. She stopped going to the gym. Her once glamorous outfits were replaced by sweats and messy buns. She even stopped posting on Instagram for a while, which was honestly shocking. It was like her entire identity had been tied to Justin and the fantasy of their new life, and without him, she didn't know what to do. One evening, she tried to talk to me. "Dave," she said, standing in the doorway of the living room, "I think we need to reevaluate everything. This divorce it's been hard on both of us." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. "What are you getting at, Carla?" She sighed dramatically, like she was the victim here. "I just think maybe we rushed into all of this. I mean, we had good times, didn't we?" I almost laughed. "Carla, you filed for divorce. You told me I was holding you back, remember? Now that Justin's gone, you're having second thoughts?" Unbelievable. She tried to play the sympathy card, talking about how lonely she was and how much she'd sacrificed for this marriage. But I wasn't buying it. "Carla," I said, cutting her off, "you made your bed. Now lie in it." Carla's little fantasy world was falling apart, and I didn't have to lift a finger. Karma was doing all the work. That's it for now, Reddit. I'll update you after the final court decision, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Update 2. Hey Reddit, Dave back again. You've stuck with me this long, so get ready for the grand slam of this whole mess. If you've been keeping up, Carla, my ex-wife, thought she could dive into court, take everything, and start her new life with Justin, her personal trainer. But karma came calling, and now we're in the final stretch. Let me tell you how the courtroom drama played out, and why Carla probably wishes she'd never stepped foot in there. Court day finally rolled around. Carla walked in, but it wasn't the usual diva strut I'd gotten used to. No designer blazer, no smug grin, just her and her lawyer, looking about as confident as a pair of kids walking into detention. She must have known things weren't going to go her way. The energy was off, and honestly, I loved every second of it. On the other side, there I was with Steve, my lawyer. He came prepared, carrying a binder so thick it could have doubled as a doorstop. I wasn't nervous. At this point, I had nothing to lose. Carla had already thrown every punch she had, and I was still standing. Today was about making sure I didn't just survive this. I won. Her lawyer started by presenting her emotional compensation claim I told you about earlier, painting a picture of Carla as this long-suffering wife who had been emotionally drained by my lack of support for her personal growth. Apparently, my refusal to support her fitness journey, aka her affair with Justin, had been a form of neglect. Steve, my lawyer, let her lawyer go on for a while, allowing them to dig their own hole. Then, it was our turn. Steve started by systematically dismantling their argument. He showed evidence that I'd not only supported Carla, but had gone above and beyond during her so-called fitness journey. He presented proof that I'd taken over household chores, adjusted my work schedule, and even encouraged her to pursue her goals. He read aloud text messages where I offered to make her healthy meals, supported her gym sessions, and even suggested we attend couples fitness classes to strengthen our bond. Then, Steve dropped the bomb. Carla's emotional compensation claim wasn't just baseless. It was a blatant attempt to cover up her own emotional negligence. He presented emails and texts where Carla openly ridiculed me to her friends, calling me boring and dead weight. He even had screenshots of her bragging about Justin and calling me her backup plan. But the real nail in the coffin came when Steve addressed the financial aspect of Carla's claim. He presented our bank statements, showing how Carla had funneled thousands of dollars from our joint account into her luxury lifestyle. Carla's lawyer tried to push back, but Steve wasn't done. He unveiled the ultimate piece of evidence, a journal entry from Carla that Steve had subpoenaed. In it, Carla had written about her master plan to leave me, get everything she could out of this marriage, and use the settlement money to fund her new life with Justin. The judge's face when he read that? Pure disbelief. The courtroom was dead silent as the judge flipped through the paperwork, his stern expression growing heavier with each page. Carla sat next to her lawyer, visibly tense, her polished nails nervously drumming against the table. Her confidence, which she had flaunted so boldly in mediation, had evaporated into thin air. Across from her, I sat with Steve, my lawyer, feeling a mix of anticipation and satisfaction. This was it, the moment everything Carla had spun into her narrative would unravel. The judge began by addressing Carla's emotional compensation claim. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, his voice steady but firm, "your request for emotional compensation lacks any substantive evidence." He paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. "While emotional distress is a valid consideration in some cases, this court requires clear and demonstrable proof. Your claims are based on subjective feelings, not facts." He turned his attention to Steve's counter-arguments. He recounted the text messages, bank statements, and Instagram captions that painted a starkly different picture from the one Carla and her lawyer had tried to present. "Mr. Patterson," the judge said, addressing me for the first time, "you've demonstrated a clear and consistent pattern of support for your wife during the marriage. The evidence provided shows no indication of emotional neglect. In fact, it suggests the opposite. You went above and beyond to accommodate her needs and aspirations." Carla's lawyer tried to interject, stumbling over an objection that the evidence was taken out of context. The judge silenced him with a raised hand. "The context is clear, counselor. Let's move on." Next, the judge turned to the financial aspect of the case. He methodically reviewed the evidence Steve had presented. "Mrs. Patterson," the judge said, his tone growing colder, "you withdrew over $23,000 from your joint accounts in the period leading up to this divorce filing. These funds were not used for household expenses or shared needs. Instead, they were spent on luxury items, high-end dining, and personal indulgences. The court finds this behavior irresponsible and in direct violation of your marital financial obligations." Carla squirmed in her seat, her face flushing a deep red. Her lawyer attempted to downplay the spending, claiming it was part of her coping mechanism during a difficult time. The judge was unimpressed. "Coping mechanisms do not justify financial recklessness," he said sharply. Then came the house. Carla had confidently argued she was entitled to half of it, claiming she had contributed emotionally, if not financially, to its upkeep. Steve was ready for this. He provided records showing I had paid the mortgage in full, maintained the property, and even handled renovations, all while Carla contributed nothing. The judge didn't mince words. "The house will remain the property of Mr. Patterson," he declared. "Mrs. Patterson, you have no financial claim to it based on the evidence presented." Carla's jaw dropped. Her lawyer whispered something in her ear, but she waved him off, too stunned to respond. The judge wasn't done. "Furthermore," he continued, "due to the unauthorized use of marital funds, Mrs. Patterson is ordered to reimburse Mr. Patterson in the amount of $23,750. You could have heard a pin drop. Carla's lawyer slumped in his chair, visibly defeated. Carla herself looked like someone had knocked the wind out of her. Her carefully curated narrative had collapsed in spectacular fashion, leaving her with nothing but the consequences of her actions. The ruling was final. No appeals, no loopholes. The judge closed his folder and said, "This court is adjourned." I leaned back in my chair, a wave of relief washing over me. Justice had been served, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Leaving the courtroom, the tension in the air was palpable. Carla's lawyer was already packing up his briefcase, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Carla trailed behind him, her head hanging low. For someone who had strutted into this process with the confidence of a reality TV star, she now looked utterly defeated. Steve patted me on the back as we walked out. "We did it," he said with a small smile. I nodded, grateful for his work. He'd not only defended me but also exposed the truth behind Carla's manipulative tactics. As I exited the courthouse, I couldn't help but glance back at Carla. She was still standing there, staring blankly at the floor. For a brief moment, I felt a twinge of pity, but it quickly faded. She had orchestrated this chaos, and now she was facing the consequences. Over the next few days, the fallout of the ruling became glaringly obvious. Carla was ordered to vacate the house within 30 days, and I made sure to enforce it. She tried to stall, claiming she needed more time to get her affairs in order, but I didn't budge. I reminded her that she'd had plenty of time to prepare while she was busy flaunting her affair with Justin. Begrudgingly, she packed up her things and moved out. Watching her leave that final day was oddly satisfying. She loaded her designer luggage into an old car, one of her friends had apparently loaned it to her, and drove off without so much as a goodbye. The house, once filled with tension and resentment, suddenly felt peaceful. Carla's financial situation spiraled quickly. Without access to my income or the marital funds she'd been draining, she was left to fend for herself. She tried to sell off some of her designer clothes and handbags, but it wasn't enough to cover the debt she owed me. Word got around that she was borrowing money from friends, who were quickly growing tired of her sob stories. As for Justin, he still vanished entirely. He didn't return her calls or messages. One night, about 2 weeks after the ruling, Carla showed up at the house unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing there, her once flawless appearance replaced by messy hair and tired eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Dave," she said softly, her voice cracking. "Can we talk?" I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "What do you want, Carla?" She hesitated, wringing her hands. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I made mistakes. Big ones. I let Justin manipulate me. I got caught up in this fantasy, and I ruined everything." Her words sounded rehearsed, but the desperation in her eyes was real. She wasn't here to apologize out of genuine remorse. She was here because she had nowhere else to turn. "I don't know what you expect me to say," I replied, my tone calm but firm. "You made your choices. You chose Justin. You chose to try and take everything from me. And now you're dealing with the fallout." Tears welled up in her eyes. Can't we at least be civil? Maybe start over? "I have nothing, Dave. I'm lost." I stared at her for a moment, feeling nothing but resolve. "Carla, I gave you everything. My support, my trust, my love, and you threw it all away. You don't get to come back now and ask for a second chance. That's not how this works." She broke down, sobbing on my porch, but I didn't flinch. After a moment, I stepped back inside and closed the door, leaving her outside with her regrets. Since that day, I've moved on. As for Carla, I've heard through the grapevine that she's still struggling to get back on her feet. She's burned bridges, lost friends, and is now facing the reality of her own choices. Sometimes karma doesn't just knock on the door, it kicks it down. And for Carla, it left her with nothing but the consequences of her actions. Dad said, "Your brother deserves the family business. You just don't have what it takes." I agreed completely. What I had instead was the patent rights to everything the business sold. Funny how quickly I developed what it takes. Hey Reddit. So my dad handed the family business to my golden child brother, saying I didn't have what it takes to run it. I agreed with him completely. What I had instead was every single patent for the products that made the business profitable. Turns out I had exactly what it takes. Here's how it went down. I'm 32, male, and for the past decade, I've been the product development engineer at my family's manufacturing company, Sterling Industrial Solutions. We make specialized industrial equipment, the kind of stuff that factories need but nobody thinks about. Conveyor belt components, automated sorting systems, custom fabrication tools. Not glamorous, but steady money. My dad built this company from scratch 40 years ago. Started in a garage with a single lathe and a dream. Worked his way up through 2 decades of grinding it out. Now we've got a 50,000 square foot facility in an industrial park outside Columbus, Ohio, 85 employees across 3 shifts, an annual revenue that used to hover around $4.5 million. Real American dream stuff. The kind of story Dad loved telling at Chamber of Commerce meetings and Rotary Club dinners. Except he's getting old now. Turned 68 last year, and his health started declining fast. Heart problems, high blood pressure, the works. Doctor told him to reduce stress or risk a serious cardiac event. Running a manufacturing company is basically nothing but stress, so something had to give. Enter my younger brother Cameron. He's 28, has a business degree from Ohio State, where he spent more time at networking events than in actual classes, and he's been groomed for leadership since the day he was born. Dad used to joke that Cameron came out of the womb wearing a tie and shaking hands. While I was in the workshop designing products and solving engineering problems, Cameron was at industry conferences shaking hands and learning to play golf. While I was covered in metal shavings testing prototypes, Cameron was having expensive dinners with clients and posting about it on LinkedIn. While I was pulling all-nighters to meet deadlines, Cameron was attending leadership seminars about synergy and paradigm shifts. The dynamic was clear from day one. I was the technical guy, the behind-the-scenes worker. Cameron was the face of the company, the future leader. Dad never explicitly said it, but you could see it in how he talked about us to other people. When someone asked about succession planning, he'd get this proud look and say, Cameron's being groomed to take over. He's got the business mind for it. Me? I was our talented engineer, or the guy who makes the magic happen in the workshop. Never the heir apparent. Never the future of the company. Just the technical resource they couldn't quite figure out how to label. Dad loves Cameron. Always has. Cameron's got the charm, the social skills, the ability to walk into a room and make everyone think he's the smartest guy there, even when he doesn't understand the technical details. Meanwhile, I'm the guy in the back room covered in metal shavings, creating the actual products that keep the lights on. Here's the thing about manufacturing. Products don't design themselves. When I started working for Dad right out of engineering school 10 years ago, Sterling Industrial was struggling. We had maybe a dozen standard products, all copied from competitors with minor modifications. Nothing proprietary, nothing special, nothing that would make a client choose us over anyone else, except maybe being slightly cheaper. We were competing purely on price, which meant razor-thin margins and constant pressure. Dad would come back from sales meetings frustrated because clients kept asking if we could match competitor pricing. The answer was usually yes, but it meant cutting our profit to almost nothing. One bad quarter, and we'd be in serious trouble. I changed that. Over 10 years, I designed 47 different products and product improvements. Not just minor modifications or cosmetic changes, completely new systems that solved problems our clients didn't even know they had. Every single design came from my brain, my hands, my late nights in the workshop testing prototypes until they worked exactly right. Let me give you some examples of what I built. The RS7 automated sorting arm? That was mine, designed from scratch. I spent 3 weeks at a client's warehouse just watching their workers manually sort components for 8 hours straight. Watch them bend, lift, sort, stack, repeat. By the end of each shift, they were exhausted and making mistakes. I went back to the workshop and designed a pneumatic arm system with optical sensors that could identify component types and sort them automatically. Took me 4 months of prototyping, but when I finished, it cut their sorting time by 60% and reduced repetitive strain injuries by 80%. Became our best-selling product within 6 months, and we couldn't manufacture them fast enough. The modular conveyor junction system? Also mine. Designed it because clients kept asking for custom configurations, and our old system required complete redesigns for every installation. If they wanted to change the layout, they basically had to buy a whole new system. It was expensive, time-consuming, and clients hated it. My modular approach meant they could rearrange components like building blocks. Need to redirect a conveyor line? Just swap out the junction module. Need to add a new branch? Click in another component. Installation time dropped from days to hours, and clients could reconfigure their systems without calling us every time. The precision alignment tool for heavy machinery? That came from a client complaining that installing our equipment took 3 days because getting everything perfectly aligned was so tedious. I designed a laser-guided alignment system with real-time feedback, cut installation to 4 hours, and eliminated the need for specialized installation crews. The vibration dampening mount system? Designed it after visiting a factory where our equipment was causing resonance problems with their building structure. Took me 2 weeks of testing different materials and configurations, but I created a mount that absorbed 90% of operational vibration, solved their problem, and opened up a whole new market for installations in older buildings. The modular filter housing for industrial ventilation? Built it because clients kept asking for customized filtration solutions, but couldn't afford bespoke engineering every time. My design let them swap filter types without replacing the entire housing. Simple concept, but nobody else was doing it. I could go on. The quick change tooling system, the smart temperature monitoring array, the automatic lubrication system that extended equipment life by 40%, the emergency shutoff controller that met new safety regulations before they were even finalized. 47 products total. Every single one documented, prototyped, tested, and refined by me personally. I'd spend weeks or months on each design, testing every possible failure mode, refining every detail until it was exactly right. Dad would check in occasionally, ask how things were going, then wander off to talk to Cameron about sales numbers. And here's the part my family didn't pay attention to. I filed patents for all of them. Not under the company name, under my name. Every single one. See, when I started at Sterling Industrial fresh out of engineering school, Dad was too cheap to hire a patent attorney. I'd suggested it during my first month, mentioned that we should protect our intellectual property as we developed new products. Patents are expensive, he said, waving away the suggestion. Thousands of dollars per application, maintenance fees every few years, legal costs if someone challenges them. For a small business like ours, it's just not worth it. I tried explaining that patents could actually be valuable assets, that they could protect our competitive advantage and potentially generate licensing revenue. He just smiled that patient smile he uses when he thinks someone doesn't understand business. "You're an engineer, not a businessman," he said. "Trust me on this one. We'll keep our innovations as trade secrets. Works just fine. Except trade secrets only work if you can actually keep them secret. In manufacturing, once you sell a product to a client, they can reverse engineer it. Our competitors were already doing that with our designs, making cheap knockoffs that undercut our pricing. So I decided to handle it myself. I started filing patent applications on my own time, using my own money. Taught myself the process through online resources and patent office guides. It was tedious and complicated, but I'm good at following technical procedures. The first few applications were rough. I made mistakes on the claims, didn't format things properly, got rejections that I had to revise and resubmit. But I learned. By patent application number 5 or 6, I had the process down. Filing fees ran about $1,500 per patent for a small entity, plus another $3,000 to $5,000 if you wanted a patent attorney to review it. I couldn't afford the attorney review, so I just did everything myself and hoped for the best. Worked most of the time. Over 10 years, I probably spent $75,000 of my own money, filing and maintaining those patents. Money I could have spent on a house down payment, or a nicer car, or literally anything else. But I believed in protecting intellectual property, even if Dad didn't. And here's the crucial part. Dad knew about it the whole time. I didn't hide what I was doing. I'd mention it at family dinners when someone asked what I'd been working on. "Oh, just filed another patent application for the new conveyor module. Should hear back in about 18 months. Dad would nod absently and change the subject. Mom would make some comment about me being so dedicated to my work. Cameron would look bored and check his phone. I even showed Dad approval letters when they arrived. "Hey, check it out! Patent number 9,247,883 just got approved. That's the RS7 sorting arm." "That's great, son," he'd say without really looking at the document. "Keep up the good work." The technical stuff bored him. He was a big picture guy, interested in sales numbers and client relationships, not the minutia of patent law and intellectual property rights. If it didn't directly impact this quarter's revenue, he didn't care about it. Same with the employment contract I'd signed when I first started. Dad had used some template he found online, filled in the blanks with my salary and benefits information, printed it out, and had me sign it. 5 pages of basic legal boilerplate covering stuff like hours, vacation time, and basic responsibilities. I read through it carefully before signing. Engineers' habit of reading the whole manual before operating any equipment. Notice there was no intellectual property assignment clause. Nothing saying that inventions I created while employed belonged to the company. Nothing about patent rights or trade secrets or any of that stuff. I pointed this out to Dad. "Hey, this contract doesn't say anything about IP rights. Should we add a clause about that?" He waved it off. "We're family. We don't need that kind of thing. Everything you do for the company belongs to the company. That's just understood. Understood, but not documented. Not legally binding. Just an assumption. I figured it didn't matter at the time. This was the family business. My patents, Dad's business. Same thing, right? We'd all benefit together. The company would use my designs, make money, and eventually I'd probably take over, or at least become a partner. The patents were just a technicality, a way to protect our innovations from competitors. Never occurred to me that Dad would hand everything to Cameron and treat me like a disposable employee. That assumption lasted 10 years, right up until the afternoon Dad called a mandatory family meeting to announce his succession plan. Dad called a mandatory meeting at the house on a Sunday afternoon. The whole family showed up. Me, Cameron, Mom, even our cousin Blake, who does sales. Dad stood at the head of the dining room table, looking serious, the way he does when he's about to make a big decision. "I'm stepping back from the business," he announced. "Health issues, doctor's orders. You know the drill. Someone needs to take over as CEO." I already knew where this was going. Cameron sat up straighter, trying to look humble but clearly excited. "I've thought about this carefully," Dad continued. "Running a business requires leadership, client relationships, and strategic thinking. Engineering skills are important, but they're not enough." He looked right at me. "You're a great engineer. Nobody disputes that. But you just don't have what it takes to run a company. You don't have the social skills, the business acumen, the vision to take Sterling Industrial to the next level." Cameron tried to look sympathetic. Mom nodded along like this made perfect sense. Cameron has been preparing for this role his entire career, Dad said. He understands the business side, knows all our major clients, and has the leadership qualities we need. So effective immediately, Cameron is the new CEO of Sterling Industrial Solutions. The room erupted in congratulations. Mom hugged Cameron. Blake shook his hand. Dad looked proud, like he'd just made the wisest decision of his life. I just sat there thinking about those 47 patents gathering dust in my file cabinet at home. Any objections? Dad asked, looking at me. None, I said. You're absolutely right. I don't have what it takes to run a company. He seemed surprised I agreed so easily. Good. Let him think I was accepting my place in the family hierarchy. Cameron launched into this speech about his vision for the company's future, expanding into new markets, improving client relationships, modernizing operations, leveraging synergies, optimizing value propositions. All buzzwords and no substance. He talked for 15 minutes without saying anything concrete about how he'd actually accomplish any of it. It was the kind of speech you'd hear at a business seminar from someone trying to sound important. Lots of gestures, lots of confidence, zero specific plans. He mentioned embracing disruptive innovation, without explaining what that meant for a company that makes conveyor parts. He talked about building strategic partnerships, without naming any potential partners. He promised to revolutionize our market segment without specifying how. I watched Dad and Mom nodding along like he was delivering the Gettysburg Address. Blake looked appropriately impressed. Everyone was buying into the performance because Cameron had always been good at performances. What about the engineering side? I asked when he finally stopped talking. Cameron turned to me with his practiced smile, the one he uses on difficult clients. That's where you come in, brother. You'll continue doing what you do best, designing products. I'll handle the business strategy, client relations, market expansion, all the executive level stuff. So nothing changes for me? Exactly. You keep innovating, I keep us growing. Perfect division of labor. We both play to our strengths. Sounds perfect, I said. Mom looked relieved that I wasn't making a scene. Dad seemed satisfied that I knew my place and wasn't going to cause problems. Cameron looked like he'd just won the lottery without having to split the winnings. I drove home that night and pulled out my patent file. 47 patents, all approved by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, all listing me as the inventor and patent holder. I'd even paid the maintenance fees religiously every few years to keep them active. Those fees weren't cheap. $1,600 per patent at the 3.5-year mark, $3,600 at 7.5 years, $7,400 at 11.5 years. I was thousands of dollars deep in keeping these patents alive. Spent the whole weekend reviewing patent law and licensing agreements on legal information websites. Turns out, when you own a patent, you own the exclusive right to make, use, and sell that invention. Nobody else can manufacture or sell your patented product without your permission. That permission usually comes in the form of a licensing agreement, where they pay you for the right to use your invention. And Sterling Industrial Solutions had been manufacturing and selling my patented products for a decade without a licensing agreement, because I'd never thought I needed one, because it was family, because I assumed we were all on the same team. Assumptions make you vulnerable. Monday morning, I showed up to work like normal. Cameron was already in Dad's old office, making it his own. He'd brought in an interior designer over the weekend to redecorate. Gone was Dad's functional workspace with a metal desk and file cabinets. Now it was all modern furniture, a glass desk, motivational posters about leadership, and this expensive espresso machine that probably cost more than my monthly salary. He'd hung his business school diploma on the wall in a fancy frame, right next to a photo of himself shaking hands with some minor local politician at a Chamber of Commerce event. The bookshelf was full of business books with titles like The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and Good to Great that looked like they'd never been opened. His assistant, he'd hired an assistant his first day as CEO, was already scheduling meetings with all our major clients. He was planning a tour to introduce himself as the new leadership, shake hands, reassure everyone that Sterling Industrial was in good hands. I went to the workshop and started my real work, documenting everything. Every product we currently manufactured, cross-referenced with my patent numbers. Every client order and what products they were buying. Every contract and what intellectual property it involved. Every piece of equipment on the production floor and what patented designs it was being used to manufacture. Took me 3 days to compile everything, but when I finished, I had a clear picture. 78% of Sterling Industrial's revenue came from products I designed and patented. The RS7 sorting arm alone accounted for 35% of annual sales. We sold about 200 units per year at $7,500 each. The modular conveyor system was another 20%. Major installations running $50,000 to $200,000. The rest was spread across various smaller products and custom installations. That old generic stuff Dad had been selling when I started? Barely moved anymore. Maybe 15% of revenue, and those margins were terrible because we were competing on price against overseas manufacturers. Clients wanted the new technology, the innovative solutions, the products that actually solved their problems instead of just being cheap commodity items. Sterling Industrial had transformed from a commodity manufacturer into an innovation company, and that innovation was sitting in my file cabinet in the form of 47 government-approved patents. I also started making calls. Reached out to the head engineer at Bartlett Manufacturing, our biggest competitor. Just casual conversation, asking how things were going in the industry. Mentioned I might be looking for new opportunities. Really, he said, clearly interested. Because we've been trying to figure out how Sterling keeps undercutting us on price with better technology. If you're available, we should talk. Made similar calls to 3 other competitors. All of them knew my work, knew my reputation, knew that I was the brains behind Sterling's product line. By Wednesday, I had a clearer picture. Cameron was spending his first week as CEO visiting clients, talking about maintaining relationships and ensuring continuity. He'd taken Blake with him for most meetings, which made sense. Blake actually knew the clients and could smooth over any awkward moments. Meanwhile, the production floor was running on autopilot. Orders were being filled, products were being assembled, everything looked fine on the surface. Cameron called an all-hands meeting Friday afternoon, gathered everyone in the warehouse, stood on a forklift so everyone could see him, and gave this speech about his vision for Sterling Industrial Solutions. We're not just a manufacturing company, he declared. We're a solutions provider. We're going to focus on customer experience, on building relationships, on being the kind of partner our clients can rely on. The warehouse guys looked confused. They were already building the products clients relied on. That's literally what manufacturing is. I know change can be difficult, Cameron continued, but I promise you, with the right leadership and the right strategy, Sterling Industrial is going to reach heights we never imagined possible. Someone asked about the engineering pipeline. Did we have new products in development? That's a great question, Cameron said, looking directly at me. Our engineering team, led by my brother, continues to do excellent work developing innovative solutions. Right? Right, I agreed. Didn't mention that the engineering team consisted of me and 2 junior technicians, who mostly handled testing. After the meeting, Cameron pulled me aside. Listen, I know this transition might feel weird for you, but Dad made the right call. You're brilliant at engineering, but running a company requires different skills. I know, I said. That's why I'm not running the company. Exactly. So let's work together, okay? You handle the technical stuff, I'll handle the business side, and we'll both benefit. Sounds like a plan. He seemed satisfied. Probably thought I'd accepted my role as the technical guy who stays in his lane. That night, I drafted a licensing agreement. Professional, straightforward, completely reasonable. Sterling Industrial Solutions could continue manufacturing and selling products covered by my patents in exchange for a licensing fee of 12% of gross revenue from those products. 12% was industry standard. Not excessive, not punitive, just normal business practice for patent licensing. Included a clause allowing them to negotiate modifications or alternative arrangements within 30 days. Monday morning, I had the document notarized and certified. Sent copies via certified mail to Cameron at the office, to Dad at home, and to our company attorney. Then I waited. The explosion came on Wednesday. Cameron burst into the workshop around 10 a.m., waving the licensing agreement like it was on fire. His face was red, that vein in his forehead throbbing the way it does when he's really mad. What the heck is this? He demanded. A licensing agreement, I said calmly. For my patents. Your patents? These are company products. Products I designed and patented under my name. Check the USPTO records if you don't believe me. He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You can't be serious. You work here. Everything you design belongs to the company. Not according to the patent applications I filed and paid for myself. Not according to the employment contract I signed, which has no intellectual property assignment clause. Want to see it? I pulled out my employment file. Sure enough, the contract Dad had me sign 10 years ago was bare bones. Salary, benefits, basic responsibilities. Nothing about intellectual property rights, nothing about inventions or patents belonging to the company. Dad had been too cheap to hire a real business attorney when he brought me on board. Just used some template he found online and filled in the blanks. Cameron's hands were shaking now. Dad's going to hear about this. He already has. I sent him a copy via certified mail, Should have arrived yesterday. This is extortion. This is business. I own patents, you want to use them. Standard practice is a licensing agreement. 12% of gross revenue is completely reasonable. 12%? Do you have any idea what that would do to our margins? Actually, I did. I'd run the numbers multiple times. 12% would cut into profits, but wouldn't kill them. Sterling Industrial would still be profitable, just less so. They'd have to actually manage the business efficiently, instead of coasting on my innovations. Then maybe you should negotiate a better rate, I suggested. That's why there's a 30-day window in the agreement. Or we could just fire you and stop making your products. You could try that, I agreed. Of course, those products account for about 78% of your revenue, so you'd be firing me and losing most of your income stream. But hey, you're the CEO now. Make whatever decision you think is best. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. The gears were turning, but not fast enough. I need to talk to Dad, he finally said, and stormed out. 2 hours later, Dad showed up. He looked older than I remembered, more tired. The health issues weren't just an excuse. He genuinely wasn't doing well. We sat down in the break room, just the two of us. What's this about, son? He asked quietly. Exactly what it says. I own patents for the products Sterling Industrial manufactures. I'm requesting a licensing agreement. But you develop those products for the company. I developed them while working for the company, I corrected. But I filed and paid for the patents myself. You knew about it at the time. Remember all those patent applications I mentioned at dinner? He waved his hand dismissively. I thought that was just paperwork. Technical stuff. It was technical stuff. Technical stuff that gives me legal ownership of those inventions. Dad looked genuinely confused. Why would you do this? We're family. Family that just told me I don't have what it takes to help run the company I basically rebuilt. Family that gave everything to Cameron while treating me like an employee. You are an employee, he said. A valued one, but still an employee. Exactly. So treat me like one. Employees with patents license them. That's how this works. Dad rubbed his temples. How much are we talking about? 12% of gross revenue from patented products. Works out to about 9% of total company revenue, give or take. That's insane. We can't afford that. Sure you can. You just can't afford to keep paying Cameron a CEO salary and donating fancy client dinners and upgrading the office furniture. But the business itself? It'll be fine. You're trying to punish us for giving the company to Cameron. I'm trying to get fair compensation for my intellectual property. If you'd rather stop making my products, that's your choice. Fire me, erase me from the company history, do whatever you want. But you don't get to use my patents without paying for them. We sat in silence for a long minute. Let me talk to our attorney, Dad finally said. See what our options are. You've got 30 days, I reminded him. After that, I start enforcing my patent rights more aggressively. He left looking older than when he'd arrived. The next week was tense. Cameron avoided me completely. Dad started showing up to the office more often, meeting with the company attorney behind closed doors. Blake approached me once, asking if I was really serious about this. Dead serious, I told him. But it's the family business. Then the family should have treated me like family instead of cheap labor. Meanwhile, I'd been having conversations with Bartlett Manufacturing. They were very interested in my work, very impressed by my patent portfolio, and very willing to discuss employment opportunities. We've been watching Sterling's product line for years, their CEO told me during a phone call. We knew someone over there was designing brilliant stuff, didn't realize it was all one person. It was, I confirmed. If you were to join Bartlett, would you be able to bring those innovations with you? Depends. I own the patents, so I can license them to whoever I want. But I'd need the right offer. What kind of offer are we talking about? I laid it out. Base salary 40% higher than what Sterling was paying me. Full benefits, equity stake in the company, and complete creative control over the engineering department. That's aggressive, he said. So is my patent portfolio. Let me talk to the board. I'll get back to you by end of week. They got back to me in 2 days with a written offer. Everything I'd asked for, plus a signing bonus that was more than I'd made in the past year at Sterling. I didn't sign it immediately. Kept it in my desk drawer as insurance. Day 25 of my 30-day deadline, Cameron finally showed up in the workshop. We're not paying you licensing fees, he announced. Our attorney says we can fight this, says there's precedent for employee inventions belonging to the company even without explicit contracts. Your attorney is wrong, I said calmly. But go ahead and try. I'll see you in court. You don't have money for a patent lawsuit? Actually, I do. Bartlett Manufacturing offered to cover my legal costs in exchange for exclusive licensing rights to my patents. Want to see the offer letter? His face went pale. You wouldn't. Try me. Right now, you have the option to keep using my patents for 12% of gross revenue. You try to fight me in court, lose, and I'll license everything to Bartlett. They'll have exclusive rights to manufacture every product that made Sterling Industrial relevant. You'll be back to selling the same generic knockoffs Dad was making 10 years ago. You'd destroy the company Dad built? Dad destroyed his own company when he decided his favorite son deserved to run it, despite having no idea how anything actually works. I'm just claiming what's mine. Cameron stood there for a long moment. I could see him trying to figure out an angle, some way to salvage this situation. He was a negotiator, a relationship builder. He was used to charming his way through problems. But this wasn't a problem you could charm your way out of. I need to talk to Dad, he finally said. You've got 5 days. He left without another word. 3 days later, I got a call from the company attorney. He wanted to meet to discuss terms. Not fight the patents, not argue about ownership, discuss licensing terms. That was a good sign. It meant they'd actually looked into the situation and realized they didn't have a leg to stand on. We met at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory. He was a middle-aged guy named Patterson, maybe 55, wearing an expensive suit that probably cost more than I made in a week. He looked tired and annoyed, like this was the last place he wanted to be on a Thursday afternoon. Your patents are valid, he said, without preamble. I had an outside firm review them. Everything's properly filed, properly maintained. Sterling Industrial has been manufacturing patented products without licensing rights for a decade. I know. Your father had no idea what he was agreeing to when you filed those patents. My father had no idea about a lot of things. That's not my problem. 12% is too high. Industry standard for patent licensing typically runs between 5 and 8%. Industry standard assumes proper contracts exist. Your client didn't have those. So we're operating under the reality that they've been using my patents without permission for 10 years. Are you claiming damages for past use? I hadn't thought about that angle. Should I be? We could calculate back licensing fees if you want. He held up a hand. Let's focus on an ongoing agreement. The past would end up in court for years. We went back and forth. He tried 5%. I laughed and reminded him Bartlett's offer was worth more. He countered at 7. I held firm at 12. This is about family dynamics, not business, he finally said. Wrong. I'm a patent holder. They're manufacturing my inventions. I want fair compensation. That's business. You're going to destroy your relationship with your family over money. My family destroyed our relationship when they made it clear I'm just an employee. After another hour of negotiation, we agreed on 10% of gross revenue from patented products. 5-year contract with renegotiation options. Quarterly payments starting within 30 days. Your father's not happy about this, Patterson mentioned. I imagine not. Your brother's furious. Cameron doesn't take things well. That's why he shouldn't be running a manufacturing company. This will cause permanent damage to those relationships. Those relationships were already damaged. I just didn't realize it until they made their priorities crystal clear. The attorney had the licensing agreement drawn up by the next day. Professional, binding, exactly what we discussed. I signed it. Cameron signed it, looking like he wanted to stab me with the pen. Dad signed it without making eye contact. And just like that, I went from employee to patent holder with a licensing agreement worth roughly $350,000 annually. The first check arrived 6 weeks later, covered the previous quarter plus back payments for the past 3 months since I'd sent the original licensing notice. Watching that deposit hit my account was better than any promotion or raise I'd ever gotten at Sterling. Cameron tried to cut me out of decision-making after that, stopped including me in meetings, stopped asking for my input on client issues, basically treated me like a contractor who happened to work in the building. Fine by me. I showed up, did my engineering work, collected my salary plus licensing fees, and started planning my exit strategy. See, the thing about patent licensing is that I could license those patents to multiple companies if I wanted. Nothing in my agreement with Sterling gave them exclusive rights. They just got first access because they'd been using my designs already. 6 months after the licensing agreement went into effect, I signed a deal with Bartlett Manufacturing. Non-exclusive license for 15% of their gross revenue from my patented products, plus the job offer I'd been sitting on. They were expanding into new markets and wanted my innovations to give them a competitive edge. That meant I was now getting licensing fees from 2 companies. Sterling Industrial's $350,000 annually, plus Bartlett's estimated $280,000 based on their projected sales. I put in my 2 weeks' notice at Sterling on a Monday morning. Cameron was in his office when I dropped the resignation letter on his desk. He read it twice, then looked up at me with pure hatred. You're going to Bartlett. I am. You're giving our competitor access to our products. I'm giving a competitor access to my products. There's a difference. Dad's going to be devastated. Dad had a decade to treat me like I mattered. He chose not to. Now he gets to live with that choice. We made you who you are. No, I made me who I am. You just took credit for it. I walked out of his office, finished my 2 weeks doing minimal work, and started at Bartlett the following Monday. The transition was seamless. I already knew the products inside and out. Bartlett's engineering team was competent and eager to learn. Within 3 months, we'd adapted my designs for their production line and started taking market share from Sterling Industrial. Turns out, when you have the same innovative products but better management and customer service, clients switch pretty quickly. Sterling's revenue dropped 15% in the first quarter after I left, dropped another 12% the quarter after that. Some of it was market forces, but a lot of it was clients realizing they could get the same products from Bartlett with better support. Cameron tried to hire replacement engineers. Went through 3 and 6 months. None of them could replicate my work because you can't replicate something when you don't understand the underlying principles. They could copy my existing designs, but they couldn't innovate new ones. I kept getting my licensing checks from Sterling quarterly, like clockwork. Watched them get smaller as their revenue declined, but that was their problem to solve. Meanwhile, Bartlett was thriving. We'd expanded into 3 new markets using modified versions of my original designs. The CEO started talking about taking the company public within 5 years. My equity stake was looking very valuable. About a year after I left Sterling, Dad called me for the first time since I'd signed the licensing agreement. His voice sounded weak, older. "Can we meet?" he asked. "I don't think that's a good idea. Please, I need to talk to you." We met at the same coffee shop where I'd negotiated the licensing agreement. He looked terrible, thin, pale, like he'd aged 10 years in 12 months. "The business is struggling," he said without preamble. "I'm aware. Cameron's trying his best, but he doesn't have your technical knowledge. We can't compete without new products." Should have thought of that before handing everything to him. "I made a mistake," Dad admitted. "I thought leadership skills mattered more than technical expertise. I was wrong." "Yes, you were. Come back. Help us fix this. Come. I'll give you whatever you want. Title, salary, equity stake. You'll give me what I built in the first place? How generous." He looked down at his hands. "I know I hurt you. I know I chose Cameron over you. But it's still the family business." "It's your business," I corrected. "I built my own. Bartlett isn't yours." "No, but my patents are. My reputation is. My skills are. Everything that matters is mine. You just have a building and some equipment. Please don't let everything I built fall apart. Everything you built was already falling apart before I showed up. I saved it once. Not doing it again." Dad started crying, actual tears running down his face. It should have felt satisfying, seeing him broken like this. Instead, it just felt empty. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't see how much you contributed. I'm sorry I always favored Cameron. I'm sorry I made you feel like you didn't matter." "I appreciate the apology," I said, "but it doesn't change anything. What can I do to make this right?" "Nothing. There's nothing you can do. Some bridges, once burned, don't get rebuilt." I left him sitting there and never looked back. Sterling Industrial Solutions filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy 18 months after I left. They couldn't compete without innovation, couldn't afford my licensing fees on declining revenue, and couldn't find engineers willing to work for Cameron's management style. The company got bought out by a private equity firm for parts. They kept some of the equipment, fired most of the staff, and dissolved the Sterling name entirely. Dad's life's work, gone. Cameron tried to get a job at other manufacturing companies. Turns out, being the CEO who drove a profitable company into bankruptcy doesn't look great on a resume. Last I heard, he was working in sales for an industrial supply company, making a fraction of what he'd been making as CEO. Blake landed on his feet. Good sales guys always do. He called me once to apologize for not speaking up during the succession announcement. Said he knew it was wrong, but didn't feel like it was his place to interfere. I told him I understood. He was just trying to survive in a dysfunctional family business like the rest of us. Mom tried to guilt me a few times, called me selfish, said I destroyed the family over money, claimed I should have been the bigger person. I stopped taking her calls after the 3rd message. The thing about being the bigger person is that it only works if the other people involved eventually grow to meet you. My family wasn't growing. They were just expecting me to shrink. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks. I got a call from my neighbor about a moving truck at my house while I was at work. I came home to find my parents and brother moving his family into my house without permission. "You don't need that much space anyway," they said. So I called the police. This happened 8 months ago, and I'm finally ready to share the whole story. I'm 29 male, work in commercial construction management, and this is hands down the most insane family drama I've ever experienced. Sorry for the length, but this gets absolutely wild and the ending is worth it. Some background about my family dynamics. I'm the older of 2 sons. My brother David is 26 and has been the golden child his entire life despite being a complete disaster. Dropped out of college twice, can't hold a job for more than 6 months, got his girlfriend Crystal pregnant at 24, and they've been leeching off our parents ever since. Meanwhile, I worked construction through high school, got my project management certification, and worked my way up to making $125,000 annually managing commercial building projects. 3 years ago, I bought a house. Not just any house, a 2,600 square foot renovated Craftsman in one of the most desirable neighborhoods in our city. I put down $75,000 cash that I'd saved working 60-hour weeks and living like a monk for 4 years. The place needed work, but I spent 2 years doing renovations myself during weekends and evenings. The kitchen renovation alone took 6 months of weekends. I gutted everything down to the studs, installed custom cabinets I built myself, and topped it all with granite countertops. The basement transformation was my masterpiece. What had been a dingy, unfinished space became a proper entertainment area with a wet bar, custom seating, and a home theater system with surround sound speakers I wired myself. The master bathroom took 3 months of careful planning. I completely reconfigured the layout, added a walk-in shower with custom herringbone tile work, positioned a soaking tub to catch natural light, and installed heated floors with a double vanity. The original hardwood floors needed complete refinishing. I spent a full month of evenings stripping, sanding, staining, and sealing every square foot myself. I updated the electrical system to modern code and upgraded all the plumbing. The landscaping was a 2-year project. I removed overgrown shrubs, planted trees strategically for privacy, installed an irrigation system, and created garden beds with perennial plants. I built the back deck myself using composite materials. Every nail, every tile, every drop of sweat equity was mine. The house sits on a 1/4-acre lot with mature oak trees, a 2-car garage, and a workshop where I restore classic cars. Property values have increased 30% since I bought it. It's not just a house, it's my sanctuary, my investment, and proof of everything I've worked for. My parents, Richard and Linda, have always had opinions about everyone else's life choices. Mom thinks her sons exist to fulfill her vision of family. She posts inspirational quotes about family on Facebook while trying to control every aspect of her children's lives. Dad just goes along with whatever she says to avoid conflict. David and Crystal live in my parents' basement with their 2 kids. David works sporadically. Delivery driver, warehouse temp. Currently unemployed again after getting fired for showing up late. Crystal has never held a job, spending her days making TikTok videos about her struggle, while my parents provide free housing, utilities, food, and babysitting. The family dynamic has always been David gets endless chances while I'm expected to have my life together and help everyone else. When David crashed his car at 22, my parents bought him another one. When he got arrested for shoplifting, they paid for his lawyer. When Crystal got pregnant, they threw a baby shower and set up a nursery. When I graduated college, I got a handshake. About 6 months ago, my family started making weird comments about my house during our monthly family dinners. It's so big for just one person. You rattling around in all that space. Must be lonely in such a big place. David's family is really outgrowing the basement. I'd just laugh it off and change the subject because, honestly, what else was I supposed to say? That I enjoyed having space? That I'd earned it? Then the comments got more pointed and frequent. You should really think about downsizing. A nice apartment downtown would be so convenient for you. David needs to consider the children's future. Real estate is such a good investment. You could probably make money selling. The classic guilt trip routine that my mother has perfected over decades of manipulating her family. I should mention that while I make good money, I'm not careless with it. My mortgage payment is $2,950 per month, including taxes and insurance, which is totally manageable on my salary. I've got $45,000 in savings, I max out my retirement contributions, and I still have plenty left over for my hobbies: woodworking, mountain biking, and restoring classic cars. I drive a paid-off truck. I cook most of my meals at home, and I'm careful with my spending. I earned every dollar through hard work and smart decisions, not luck or handouts. The situation escalated about a month ago during what I thought was a normal family dinner. David was complaining about their living situation, How cramped they were in the basement. How the kids needed their own rooms. How Crystal was getting depressed being stuck downstairs all the time. My mom was making sympathetic noises and shooting meaningful looks at me across the table. Finally, she came out with it. You know, Alex, you have all that space going unused. Those guest bedrooms just sitting empty most of the time. They're not guest bedrooms, I corrected. One's my home office, the other's my workshop storage. But you could easily combine those functions into one room, she continued. Really, it's almost wasteful to have so much space for just one person. I could see where this was going. Mom, let's not do this. Do what? I'm just saying that family helps family. David's in a tough spot right now. David's been in a tough spot for 6 years. Maybe it's time he figured it out himself. That's when Crystal chimed in. It's easy for you to say. You don't have kids to worry about. Some of us have responsibilities. I looked at her, this woman who'd never held a job in her life, lecturing me about responsibility. Crystal, I have responsibilities too. Like the mortgage I pay every month on the house I bought. But you don't need all that space, David said. It's not like you're using it. How do you know what I use it for? Come on, man. You've got like 4 bedrooms and you sleep in one. That's 3 empty bedrooms while my kids are sharing a basement room with no windows. Then get your own place. The table went quiet. My dad cleared his throat. Son, maybe we could work something out. Some kind of arrangement that helps everyone. What kind of arrangement? My mom leaned forward, and I could see she'd been planning this conversation. Well, what if David's family moved into your place? Just temporarily. You could get a nice apartment downtown, close to work, no maintenance hassles, and David could take over the house payments. I actually laughed. Are you serious? David can't even hold a job for 6 months, and you want him to take over a $3,000 mortgage? He'd grow into it, my mom said. Having that responsibility might be exactly what he needs to get his life together. And what happens when he can't make the payments? Because we all know he can't make the payments. That's a pretty negative attitude, Crystal said. Maybe if people believed in David more, he'd do better. I've believed in David for 26 years. At some point, belief needs to be backed up by actions. The conversation devolved from there, with my family making increasingly ridiculous arguments about how this arrangement would benefit everyone, especially me. According to them, I'd save money, have less responsibility, be closer to work, and best of all, I'd be helping family. It was a win-win-win situation that only a selfish person would refuse. I left dinner early that night, but I thought that was the end of it. My family has always been big on dramatic conversations that fizzle out when reality sets in. I figured they'd realize how impossible their plan was and move on to something else. I was wrong. The following Tuesday, I was reviewing project blueprints in my home office when I got a text from my mom, coming by around 2 p.m. to measure the guest bedrooms. David wants to see if his furniture will fit. I called her immediately. Mom, what are you talking about? Why would David's furniture need to fit in my guest rooms? Oh, sweetie, we've been discussing this more since Sunday. David's lease is up next month, and his landlord is raising the rent to an impossible amount. We thought you could move into that nice apartment complex downtown, and David could take over the house payments. It really is the perfect solution. I felt like I was in an alternate reality. This is my house. I bought it. I renovated it. I pay for it. Well, yes, but you don't really need all that space. And David has children to think about. You're being selfish keeping all that room to yourself when your brother's family is cramped in a basement. Selfish. For wanting to live in the house I bought with my own money. Mom, we're not having this conversation. David can figure out his own housing situation like every other adult in America. She got that icy tone she uses when she's not getting her way. Alex, we've given this considerable thought and discussed it extensively. It's the right thing to do for the family. David can probably take over your mortgage payments. It'll actually save you money in the long run. Take over my payments? The guy who's been unemployed for 3 months and has never paid for anything more expensive than a cell phone bill? The answer is no. End of discussion. Don't be hasty. At least think about it overnight. We'll come by tomorrow to take some measurements and look at the logistics. No, you won't. Don't come by. Don't measure anything. The answer is no. It will always be no. And if you show up at my house without permission, I'll call the police. She hung up on me. That should have been the end of it. But my family has never been good at accepting no for an answer, especially when they've convinced themselves they're entitled to something. 2 weeks later, I was on a job site about 40 minutes from home, overseeing the installation of HVAC systems in a new office building, when I got a call from my elderly neighbor across the street. She's this sweet woman who's lived in the neighborhood for 30 years and keeps an eye on things for everyone. Alex, dear, I hope I'm not bothering you at work, but there's a moving truck at your house and people carrying furniture inside. I thought you might want to know since your car isn't in the driveway. My blood turned to ice. What kind of people? Well, it looks like your parents and that young man who visits sometimes. And there's a pregnant woman directing where they should put things. I assumed you knew about it, but then I realized you might not since you're not there. I was in my truck and driving home before she finished the sentence. I called my site supervisor and told him there was a family emergency, then drove like my life depended on it, weaving through traffic and running yellow lights. When I pulled into my driveway, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. A U-Haul truck was backed up to my front door. My parents' car was there. David's beat-up Honda was there. And there were people moving furniture, baby cribs, a ratty couch, boxes of clothes, even a refrigerator, into my house. I sat in my truck for 30 seconds, trying to process the absolute audacity. They were actually trying to move David's family into my house, without asking, without permission, without any legal right whatsoever. Like I didn't exist. Like my ownership meant nothing. Like they could just decide to redistribute my property because they felt like it. I got out and walked straight to my front door, which was propped open with a box. The scene inside was even worse than I'd imagined. David was carrying a mattress up my stairs, grunting with effort and sweating through his shirt. Crystal was sitting on my leather couch, the one I'd saved for 6 months to buy, while her 2 kids ran around getting their sticky hands on everything. My mom was standing in the middle of it all with a clipboard and measuring tape, directing the operation like some kind of demented moving coordinator. What the heck is going on here? I said loud enough that everyone stopped what they were doing. My mom turned around with this fake surprised expression, like she'd been caught organizing a surprise party instead of committing a felony. Alex, you're home early. We wanted to get David settled before you got back, so it wouldn't be such a disruption for you. Settled? Get out. All of you. Right now. David had stopped halfway up the stairs with the mattress, his face red from exertion. Dude, relax. Mom explained everything to us. This works out better for everyone. You get to downsize, we get the space we need, everyone wins. Did she explain how you're going to make a $2,950 mortgage payment on your $0 salary? Crystal looked up from her phone for the first time since I'd arrived. Actually, we talked to someone at the social services office about government assistance programs for housing. With David's income level and the kids, we can probably get help with the payments. Plus, there are tax benefits for families. I stared at her. This woman who had never contributed a dime to society, casually discussing how to put my house on government assistance. You want to put my house on welfare? It's not like that, my mom jumped in, setting down her clipboard. David would be taking over the financial responsibilities, and if he needs a little help from available programs, that's what they're for. It's actually very responsible planning. Programs are for people who buy houses they can afford, not for people who steal houses from their brothers. Nobody's stealing anything. My dad finally spoke up from where he was stacking boxes in my hallway. This is just a family arrangement. You'll save money living downtown. David gets space for his kids. Your mother and I get to see our grandchildren in a proper home. Everyone benefits. Everyone benefits except me, who loses the house I bought and renovated myself. Did any of you think to ask me before moving someone into my house? We knew you'd be difficult about it, my mom said matter-of-factly. That's why we wanted to present it as a done deal. Once you see how well it works out, you'll understand that we were right. How did you even get in? I never gave anyone permission to enter my house. David held up a key, dangling it like it was the most natural thing in the world. Mom had a spare maid when she house sat for you last year. Remember when you went to Colorado for that wedding? Last year when I went to Colorado for my friend's bachelor party. She'd offered to check on the place and water my plants, and I gave her a key for the weekend. I never got it back, and when I asked about it, she said she'd lost it. She'd been lying for over a year. You've been planning this, I said, the pieces falling into place. This isn't some spur-of-the-moment decision. I pulled out my phone and started dialing 911. Who are you calling? My mom demanded, her voice rising an octave. The police. To report a break-in and theft in progress. Alex, put that phone down. We're family. You can't call the police on family. Family doesn't break into each other's houses and try to steal them. The 911 operator answered. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report a break and enter in progress. People have moved furniture into my house without permission and are refusing to leave. The police arrived a few minutes later. 2 officers, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else when they realized it was a domestic situation. After reviewing my documentation and confirming I owned the house, they ordered my family to remove everything and leave. I changed my locks that same night and installed a security system. But this was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up to 38 text messages from various family members and family friends. Apparently, my mom had spent the entire night calling everyone she knew to tell them what a heartless son I was, spinning the story to make me look like the villain. But the absolute peak of their delusion came the following Saturday, when they staged an intervention in my driveway. My parents, David's entire family, plus my aunt and uncle, and my mom's pastor from her church. 8 adults standing in my driveway like they were about to perform some kind of exorcism. The sight was almost comical if it weren't so infuriating. They'd clearly coordinated this ambush, probably spending hours planning their approach and dividing up talking points. My mom stood in the center like a general commanding troops, while my aunt held a folder of what looked like printed articles, probably about family obligation and housing assistance programs. The pastor wore his most serious expression, the one he probably reserved for addressing serious sins from the pulpit. "Alex," my mom said in her most serious voice, "we need to have a family meeting." "No, we don't. Get off my property before I call the police again." "Son," the pastor said, stepping forward with his hands clasped in front of him like he was delivering a sermon. "I understand there's been some conflict in your family. Your mother asked me to speak with you about the importance of family unity and Christian charity." I looked at my mom in disbelief. "You brought your pastor to guilt-trip me into giving away my house?" The pastor continued in that earnest tone that religious people use when they think they're saving your soul. "The Bible teaches us to care for our family, especially children in need. Matthew tells us that whatever we do for the least of these, we do for Christ himself. The Bible also teaches that if a man doesn't work, he doesn't eat. David's 26 years old with 2 kids and he's unemployed by choice. Maybe start there, Pastor." My aunt stepped forward, trying to take a more emotional approach. She was holding what appeared to be printouts from websites about family financial planning and multi-generational housing arrangements. "Alex, sweetie, we've all helped family over the years. When you needed help in college, I worked 3 jobs in college and graduated debt-free. When you needed a place to stay after graduation, I lived in a 400-square-foot studio apartment and saved every penny for 2 years." My uncle tried a different angle, the man-to-man approach that older men always think will work on younger ones. "Look, son, I get it. You worked hard for what you have. Nobody's taking that away from you. But David's got kids to think about. Family responsibility. You'll understand when you have children someday. If I have kids someday, I'll plan for them and provide for them myself, like a responsible adult. I won't expect my brother to give up his house to make room for my poor decisions." Crystal was standing behind David holding their youngest, giving me a look like I'd personally ruined her life. The baby was fussing in the heat, and she was clearly uncomfortable being pregnant and standing in my driveway for this ridiculous confrontation. "This is exactly why you can't keep a girlfriend," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're selfish and cold. No woman wants a man who won't help his own family." I laughed, actually laughed out loud. "Crystal, you're 24 years old with 2 kids, no job, no education, no skills, and you're living in your boyfriend's parents' basement. Maybe don't give relationship advice." "Hey!" David stepped forward, finally showing some backbone. "Don't talk to her like that. Then tell her to keep her mouth shut about things she doesn't understand." My mom tried to regain control of the intervention, clearly frustrated that their carefully planned ambush was falling apart. "Alex, we've talked to someone with legal expertise about this situation. There may be options for family property arrangements that you haven't considered." This was new information, and it sent a chill down my spine. "What kind of legal options?" A family law attorney from our church congregation explained that in some cases, family property can be subject to family necessity arrangements, especially when children are involved, and there are significant disparities in family wealth and living situations. I stared at them, realizing they actually thought they could sue their way into my house. They'd actually consulted someone about legal ways to force me to give up my property. Did this church attorney also explain that I'm 29 years old and you have 0 legal claim to my property? Did he mention that what you attempted was breaking and entering? Did he explain the difference between wishful thinking and actual law? When your father and I are old and need help, don't come crying to us for support, my mom said, playing her final card. "Deal," I said without hesitation. That stunned her. She expected me to back down, to choose potential future guilt over present-day boundaries. They all left, leaving me feeling both victorious and sad, but this wasn't over. My family doesn't give up easily, especially when they're desperate. And I was starting to suspect there was more to their desperation than just David needing more space. I decided to investigate, and what I found changed everything. Public records in our state are mostly available online if you know where to look and what to search for. I spent an entire Saturday afternoon diving deep into county records, court filings, and property databases. It took me about 6 hours of methodical searching to piece together the full picture, and when I did, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The first red flag was a second mortgage filing I found buried in the property records. My parents were in foreclosure proceedings. According to the county records, they'd taken out a second mortgage on their house 2 years ago for $90,000. The paperwork showed they'd claimed it was for home improvements and debt consolidation, but I could see from the timing that it coincided with when David and Crystal had moved in. Then last year, they'd taken out a home equity line of credit for another $45,000, maxing out their borrowing capacity. They owed almost $220,000 on a house worth maybe $180,000 in the current market. They were completely underwater. But the real shock was the foreclosure notice dated 7 weeks ago. They were 4 months behind on payments, and the bank was moving to repossess. They had until the end of next month to bring the account current or lose the house. The total amount needed to cure the default was over $18,000, money they clearly didn't have. Now their desperation made perfect sense. They weren't just trying to help David. They were trying to save themselves. If David took over my mortgage payments, they could use the money they'd been spending supporting him and his family to catch up on their own house payments. It was a desperate attempt to rob Peter to pay Paul, with me as the unwilling victim. But where had all that money gone? $135,000 in loans over 2 years was serious cash for people on a fixed income. I kept digging through business registration records and found the smoking gun. 18 months ago, my dad had registered an LLC called Morrison Family Investments. According to the filings, it was supposed to be a house flipping business. The paperwork showed grand plans for buying, renovating, and reselling properties for profit during what they saw as a red-hot real estate market. More research revealed the full extent of their financial disaster. Morrison Family Investments had purchased 2 properties using the borrowed money from their house. The first was a 1960s ranch house they bought for $98,000, intending to flip it for $150,000 after renovations. Instead, they got in over their heads with structural problems they hadn't anticipated, contractor issues, and permit delays. The house sat on the market for 8 months before finally selling for $63,000, a $35,000 loss plus carrying costs, taxes, and renovation expenses. The second property was even worse. They'd bought a foreclosed duplex for $110,000, planning to renovate and rent it out for steady income. But they'd underestimated the extent of the damage and the cost of bringing it up to rental code standards. When they couldn't complete the renovations or make the payments, that property went into foreclosure too. It was eventually sold at auction for $75,000, meaning they lost about $35,000 on that deal as well, not counting the money they'd poured into attempted repairs. My parents had blown their retirement savings and leveraged their house to the maximum, trying to become real estate moguls during the pandemic boom. They'd watched HGTV shows and thought it looked easy, completely ignoring the risks and complexities involved in property investment. And now they were about to lose everything. But the financial disaster went even deeper than I initially thought when I started digging into David and Crystal's situation. David had filed for bankruptcy 18 months ago. Chapter 7. Complete discharge of all debts including $28,000 in credit cards and a defaulted car loan. That explained why he couldn't qualify for his own mortgage. Crystal had multiple collection agencies after her for unpaid medical bills, store credit cards, and something called quick cash loans for $4,200 at an astronomical interest rate. My perfect judgmental family was completely broke. Not just broke, financially destroyed. And they'd been hiding it from me while lecturing me about family responsibility. Suddenly, their plan made perfect sense. Get me out of my house, move David's family in, use the money they'd save on supporting David to catch up on their mortgage payments. They probably figured once I was paying rent downtown instead of building equity, I'd be more willing to help them out financially on a regular basis. I called my lawyer and told him what I'd found. Alex, you need to be very careful here. Desperate people do desperate things, but you also have them completely documented if they try anything else. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to protect myself from my family's schemes. I was going to make sure they face the consequences of their choices and learn that actions have real results. Over the next week, I put together a comprehensive file on their financial situation. Every document, every record, every piece of evidence of their desperation and poor decisions. I organized it all in a 3-ring binder with tabs and photocopies of everything. Their foreclosure papers, David's bankruptcy filing, Crystal's collection notices, the failed business registration documents, tax liens, court judgments, Everything that painted the picture of a family in complete financial freefall who thought they could solve their problems by stealing from me. Then I started making some very strategic phone calls, each one carefully planned for maximum impact. First, I contacted their mortgage company and the bank handling their foreclosure. I sent a detailed letter explaining the attempted fraud, including documentation of David's unauthorized calls to my mortgage company, claiming to be my representative, evidence of their attempts to manipulate me into transferring my property to help them avoid foreclosure, and records of their business failures that had led to their current situation. I explained that they had used a stolen key to break into my house and attempt to move David's family in without permission, all as part of a scheme to use my mortgage payments to save their own house. The letter was professional but thorough, laying out exactly how they'd attempted to commit fraud and how their actions demonstrated they were not operating in good faith with their lender. I included copies of the police report from when I'd had them removed from my house, documentation of David's bankruptcy that should have been reported to the court, and evidence of their deliberate deception about their financial situation. 3 days later, I got a call from a fraud investigator at the bank asking me to come in and give a formal statement to their legal team. Apparently, attempting to fraudulently transfer property to avoid foreclosure was something they took very seriously, especially when it involved lying to multiple financial institutions. Second, I called the bankruptcy court clerk's office and spoke to someone in the trustee's office about David's case. David's Chapter 7 discharge had included a requirement to report any significant changes in his financial situation for 3 years after filing. Attempting to take over a house payment definitely counted as a significant change that should have been reported to the court. The fact that he'd been calling my mortgage company and investigating loan assumptions without reporting this to the bankruptcy court was a violation of his discharge agreement. I provided them with documentation of David's calls to my mortgage company, evidence of his attempts to take over my house payments, and records showing he'd been planning this for weeks without proper disclosure. The clerk informed me that bankruptcy fraud was a federal crime, and that they would be reopening his case for review. Third, I may have mentioned to a few people in the community that David was looking for work and seemed really desperate for money, to the point where his family was making some questionable decisions. Word travels fast in small towns, and reputation matters when you're job hunting. I wasn't spreading lies. Everything I mentioned was completely true, but I made sure the right people heard about his character and reliability issues. I spoke to the manager at the hardware store where David had applied for work, mentioning that I'd heard he was having some legal troubles related to bankruptcy fraud. I talked to my neighbor who worked at the auto parts store, casually mentioning that my brother was struggling with some honesty issues and making poor decisions that affected his family. Nothing malicious, just concerned family members sharing factual information about someone's character. But the most satisfying call was to my mom's church. I spoke to the church secretary and mentioned that some longtime members of the congregation were facing serious financial difficulties and had been making some questionable decisions lately. I suggested they might benefit from financial counseling and perhaps some assistance from the church's emergency fund, and provided names and details about their situation. I explained that my parents had been involved in some concerning behavior, including attempted property fraud and breaking into family members' homes. I mentioned that they'd been lying to church members about their financial situation while asking for help with legal fees. I suggested that the church might want to look into the situation more carefully before providing any assistance, since there seemed to be some dishonesty involved in how they were presenting their circumstances. The secretary thanked me for the information and said they would definitely be following up with the family to better understand their situation and provide appropriate guidance. Within 2 weeks, the consequences started rolling in like dominoes. My parents' foreclosure was accelerated due to the fraud investigation. They went from having a month to save their house to having 2 weeks to vacate. David's bankruptcy case was reopened for review based on his attempted assumption of debt that he'd never reported to the court. The church started asking uncomfortable questions about my parents' financial situation, their business dealings, and their attempts to involve the pastor in what was essentially a property dispute. Several potential employers in town started asking questions about David's background and reliability after hearing concerns about his character from community members. 3 weeks after I'd started my research and documentation campaign, I got a call from my mom. Her voice was small and defeated. "Alex." It was barely above a whisper. "Hi, Mom. We need to talk to you. Can you come over, please? I'm pretty busy these days. Please, it's important. It's urgent." I drove over that evening to find their house in complete chaos. Moving boxes everywhere, Crystal crying on the couch while the kids ran around confused, David frantically loading stuff into his Honda like the house was on fire. "What's going on?" I asked. though I already knew exactly what was happening. My dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. We lost the house, son. Final foreclosure went through yesterday. We have 48 hours to get everything out. That's unfortunate. Where are you planning to go? That's what we wanted to talk to you about. My mom stepped forward, all the fight and superiority completely gone from her demeanor. Alex, we know we made mistakes. We know we handled things badly with your house. But we're family and we need help. What kind of help are you looking for? David stopped loading boxes and turned around, sweat dripping down his face. Dude, we're in serious trouble. Lost the house. The bankruptcy thing got reopened somehow. Crystal's mom won't let us stay there anymore because of some collection agency calling. We've got nowhere to go. I'm sure you'll figure something out. You're all adults. Alex, my dad said quietly, his voice shaking. We were wondering, maybe we could stay with you? Just temporarily, until we get back on our feet. I stared at him. Stay with me? In the house you tried to steal from me? We're family, Crystal said through her tears. You have to help us. That's what family does. Actually, I don't have to do anything. David stepped forward, looking defeated. Come on, man. What do you want us to do? Live under a bridge? Sleep in our cars? The kids don't have anywhere to go. I honestly don't care what you do. You created this mess? You can figure out how to get out of it. My mom tried one more time, her voice breaking. Alex, I know we hurt you. I know we made terrible mistakes. But we're sorry. We're really, truly sorry. And we need you. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry your plan failed. You're sorry you're facing consequences. But you're not sorry you tried to steal from me. I looked around at all of them. Desperate, broke, homeless, and finally understanding that their actions had real consequences. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to clean up the mess you made. You're going to find jobs, real jobs that you actually show up for. You're going to find apartments you can actually afford. You're going to stop expecting other people to bail you out of your bad decisions. And if we don't, David asked, then you'll be homeless, which honestly sounds like a problem you created for yourselves. My dad made one last desperate attempt. Son, please. We made mistakes, but we're still your family. No, I said, heading for the door. Family doesn't try to steal from each other. You guys are just people I happen to share DNA with who turned out to be criminals. Alex, my mom called after me, her voice cracking completely. You can't just abandon us. I turned around one final time. Watch me. That was 8 months ago. Through mutual acquaintances and social media, I've heard bits and pieces about what happened to them since then. My parents moved into a one-bedroom apartment in the worst part of town, and both got jobs at a discount grocery store. They work opposite shifts, so one of them can always be home with David's kids, since David and Crystal can't afford childcare. David and Crystal moved in with her sister, in a double-wide trailer in a mobile home park outside the city limits. David finally got a steady job working at an auto parts store, but it's minimum wage and they're barely scraping by. Crystal got a job at a fast food restaurant. They're all struggling financially, working jobs they hate, living in places they can't stand, dealing with the stress of poverty, and the shame of their fall from middle-class respectability. Exactly the kind of life they were trying to avoid by stealing my house. Meanwhile, I'm still living in my beautiful house that I bought and renovated myself. I got promoted to senior project manager last month with a $15,000 raise. I'm dating someone incredible, a woman who owns her own accounting firm, has her own house, and has zero interest in anyone else's property or money. My parents told me to move out if I wasn't going to support my brother's future. So I did, with nothing but a backpack. 10 years later, they were homeless and begging me for help. I said no and drove off in the car. They sold my PC to buy. Hey Reddit, I usually only lurk here, but things have gotten out of hand, so I figured I would post her. That's what my mom told me 5 months ago during Thanksgiving dinner, like it was a fun fact. Everyone heard it. And no, it wasn't even the first time she said that. The first time was 10 years earlier, right after I asked why everything in the house revolved around Andrew, my older brother. I was 18. That night, they kicked me out. Now I'm 31 male CEO of a financial firm. 7 figures, penthouse, real suits, not the stuff you rent for prom. And yeah, they want back in. They've tried the whole "but we're family" line. Some people say I'm wrong for cutting them off. So here's the start of it. You tell me. I was born in a decent house. 2 parents, 2 incomes, suburbs, a backyard with a cracked trampoline. Looked normal from the outside, but I was never supposed to be in the picture. My parents had Andrew, 33 male, 2 years before me, and they were content. He was their golden boy from day one. Blonde hair, perfect teeth, the kind of kid who scored goals and smiled for every camera. Teachers loved him. Coaches praised him. My parents treated him like the second coming of Wall Street Jesus. Then I came along. I wasn't planned. They told me that. Proudly. My mom used to joke, "You were our little oopsie." But it wasn't a joke when I heard her say to my aunt over the phone, "Andrew was meant to succeed. Matthew just came along for the ride." That sentence stuck. Still does. Growing up, everything in our house bent around Andrew. The guy never cleaned up after himself. He'd throw his dirty laundry across the hallway like a dog marking territory. My mom? She'd just sigh, "Boys will be boys," and pick it up. Meanwhile, if I left my cereal bowl in the sink, she'd lose her mind. "You're old enough to be responsible." Andrew got a brand new mountain bike when he turned 13. Not some cheap Walmart special, one of those $600 giants with the gear shifters and front shocks. When I turned 13, I got a used bookshelf and a $10 Target lamp. "You like reading," they said. I remember once Andrew accidentally crashed my dad's old Honda, backing it out of the driveway. Screwed up the bumper and taillight. Guess who they blamed? Me. Said I distracted him. I was inside doing math homework. But the king of all moments came during his high school graduation. They threw him a full-blown party. I'm talking tents in the backyard, rented speakers, a banner, food trays from some Italian place. My mom invited everyone. Neighbors, co-workers, random people from church. They made a toast, gave him a new watch. When I graduated 2 years later, I got a small chocolate cake on a paper plate and a "You're lucky we're busy this weekend." And no, I didn't fail. I graduated with a 3.9 GPA, worked part-time at a grocery store to help with bills, and never got into any trouble. But that wasn't enough. Not when you're standing next to Andrew, the future lawyer. He wasn't even a good dude. Dude was smooth, I'll give him that. He could lie with a smile and charm your wallet out of your pocket. Teachers thought he was brilliant, but I saw his search history. Half his schoolwork was bought online. My dad found out once, shrugged it off. He's learning to delegate. That's leadership. Meanwhile, if I forgot to vacuum one Saturday, I'd get a full 20-minute lecture on how I'd never survive in the real world. Once, I needed $20 for a school field trip. Took me 4 days to get it. Andrew came home once with $200 missing from my dad's wallet, said it fell out. No one blinked. By the time I was 17, I had a job, a solid GPA, and barely left my room. Not because I was emo or depressed. I was tired of proving, of talking, of trying. Andrew strutted through life like everything was owed to him. He was that guy who thought he was too good to wait in line, too smart to study, and too important to be wrong. The worst part? The world let him get away with it. So did our parents. I think they liked the version of him they made up in their heads more than the real one. I remember this one night, we were both sitting in the living room. He was on the couch, scrolling through his phone. I was on the floor fixing my laptop, busted hinge. I'd been saving for months to buy a new one, but couldn't afford it yet. I asked him if he had any leftover parts or cables from his old machine. He laughed and said, "You should just ask Mom and Dad to get you a new one." Worked for me. I looked at him. He wasn't joking. He actually believed that if he asked, he'd get it. And he wasn't wrong. They bought him a MacBook the following week to help him with college apps. I was still taping the corner of my screen shut every night. So yeah, by the time I hit 18, I knew what the deal was. I was the extra. The spare tire, the backup plan. They weren't cruel about it. That's the thing. It was worse than cruel. It was polite indifference. And when I finally brought it up, asked why I always got the short end, they didn't even argue. My dad folded his paper and said, "You need to stop being dramatic." And my mom? She looked me dead in the eye and said the thing I'll never forget. "We only wanted one child." Straight face, no hesitation. That's when I knew. It didn't matter how much I worked, helped, studied, saved, or stayed out of trouble. I wasn't a son to them. I was just the leftover. And the leftover was about to make a move they didn't see coming. I was 16 when I started building up the dream. You know, the one thing that made everything else tolerable. I didn't care about sneakers, parties, or prom. All I wanted was my own custom-built gaming PC. It wasn't even about gaming, not really. It was about ownership, control, something that was mine, that I built from the ground up piece by piece. No handouts, no begging, just me, a summer job, and a spreadsheet taped to my wall tracking every part. CPU, GPU, RAM, case, PSU. I used to watch PC building YouTube channels like they were religion. Every extra shift at the grocery store went into that build. I skipped meals sometimes just to save more. I didn't spend on clothes, didn't upgrade my cracked phone, didn't go out. My friends called me frugal. Truth? I was desperate. I was finally going to have something that couldn't be taken from me. Or so I thought. By the time I was 17, I had just over $1,400 saved. Enough to get a mid-tier but solid setup. Ryzen chip, 16 gigabytes RAM, decent graphics card. I even planned to paint the case myself with matte black and gold detailing. That money sat in a shoebox under my bed for months. I didn't trust banks, and, ironically, I especially didn't trust my parents. That shoebox was my vault. I kept the bills wrapped in a rubber band like a broken little mobster. I'd pull it out at night and flip through the stack, just to remind myself it was real. Until the day it wasn't. It was a Sunday. Andrew had just gotten back from some 2-day business mentorship retreat he found online. Walked through the door like he'd been crowned emperor of tech startups. Aviators on inside, some knockoff leather briefcase swinging at his hip. Mom rushed to greet him, like he'd returned from war. "How was it, sweetheart? Did you learn anything?" He smiled like a politician. "Mom, I've got a pitch deck and everything. I just need startup capital. They said I've got potential." She looked at him like he was Elon Musk's younger cousin. "We'll figure something out." That sentence should have raised alarms. Instead, I went upstairs, minding my own business. 2 days later, I came home from my shift. My shoebox was gone. Not moved. Gone. I tore through the closet, flipped every drawer, lifted the bed, checked under the mattress. Nothing. At first, I thought maybe Mom cleaned my room again. She had this habit of going in unannounced. Treated my space like it was a storage unit she rented out. I marched downstairs. "Mom, have you seen my shoebox?" She didn't look up from her crossword puzzle. "What shoebox?" "The one under my bed. With the money. The PC savings." She paused. Just for a second. That pause said everything. "Your dad and I needed it for something important," she said, like she was talking about borrowing the car. I blinked. "You... what?" She finally looked up. "It was just sitting there, and it's not like you're using it for anything urgent?" I stared at her, jaw clenched. "It was for my computer." She waved her hand like I'd said I was saving for action figures. "We'll make it up to you." Turns out something important was Andrew's startup fund. The kid wanted to create an app that paired gym trainers with clients. He called it FitFuse or some garbage like that. Had no coding background, no plan. Just buzzwords and ego. And my parents? They ate it up like gospel. "He just needs a chance," Dad told me when I confronted him later. I replied, "So you stole my chance to give him one?" He didn't flinch. "It's not stealing if it stays in the family." I swear, I felt my blood pressure spike like I aged 10 years in one sentence. I locked myself in my room for the rest of that night. Laid on my bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning like it was mocking me. That PC was my escape plan. My one joy. My tiny rebellion against being the unwanted one. And they sold it off like it was spare furniture. What made it worse? Andrew didn't even say thank you. No acknowledgement, no apology. Not even a nod. He acted like the money had fallen from the sky. And a month later, the app flopped. Website never launched. He spent half the money on a refurbished MacBook and some branding consultant who ghosted him. The other half? Gone in gas, Uber Eats, and one extremely dumb attempt to bribe a community college classmate to build the app. That night, he came home and said, "Turns out the startup world's tougher than it looks." Then laughed. I laughed too. Then punched a hole in my closet door the second he left the room. They never paid me back. Every time I asked, it was some version of, "We'll talk later," or "Don't be petty." Mom even pulled the emotional blackmail card. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to raise 2 boys on a budget?" I said, "Then maybe you shouldn't have robbed the one who wasn't throwing money down the drain." She looked offended, like I was the problem. That's when I realized this wasn't about money. It never was. They didn't think I deserved the same chances. They didn't see me as someone they invested in. They saw me as a resource to be drained for the real son's benefit. You want to know the worst part? A few weeks after the whole thing fell apart, I walked past the living room and heard them talking. "Dad, Andrew just needs more time. He's got vision. Matthew's too rigid. He wouldn't know what to do with opportunity anyway." I stood there, back to the wall, listening to my father basically say I wasn't built for success. Meanwhile, I was the one working double shifts, paying for my own books, stacking every dollar like it was a life raft. And Andrew? Still getting praised for failing upwards. That was the day something inside me cracked. I stopped asking for anything. I started putting money directly into a new savings account. One I opened secretly at a different credit union under my own name. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't leave the bank card at home. I stopped mentioning anything I bought or saved for. If I wanted something, I got it quietly. No bragging, No updates, no more trust. But the betrayal burned under the surface. I carried it with me every day like a scar on the inside of my mouth, silent but raw. And the irony? That betrayal was just the prelude. Because what they did next made the stolen PC money feel like a parking ticket. It was a few months after my 18th birthday. College acceptance letters were rolling in. I got into a strong business program, top 10 in the state. My heart was pounding when I opened the envelope. I remember rereading the words, "We are pleased to inform you," like I was hallucinating. I had the grades. I had some scholarships. But I still needed help covering the gap. So I did something I swore I wouldn't. I asked my parents for help. That conversation, it deserves its own chapter. Because that's when they told me the college fund I'd been building since I was 15, under my dad's name, was gone too. That's when the last string snapped. That's when I finally saw them not as parents, but as people who never saw me as a son. I still remember the envelope. Thick cardstock, blue seal, the kind that screams, "We matter more than you." When I opened it, I didn't feel like I'd made it. I felt relief. Like maybe I wasn't as useless as my parents made me feel every time Andrew got praised for tying his shoes. The letter said I'd been accepted into the University of Michigan's Ross Business School. Not community college. Not some joke diploma mill. Ross. I was 18, and for the first time, I thought I had a shot at building something real. I waited until dinner to tell them. Big mistake. We were eating spaghetti, one of those bland weekday meals. Nobody said anything unless the TV was too loud. Dad was halfway through slicing an apple when I cleared my throat. "I got accepted into Michigan," I said, calm, like I was trying not to sound desperate for approval. Nobody flinched. My mom looked up, nodded. "Oh, that's nice. That's it. No questions, no congratulations, no, 'I'm proud of you.' Just a flat, dry nod like I told her I took the trash out." Andrew, across the table, didn't even blink. He was pouring soda like this was beneath him. I laid the letter on the table. "I got a partial scholarship. I still need to cover about $20,000 a year. If you guys can help with the first year, I can get loans and work to handle the rest." Dad didn't even look up. "We don't have it." That sentence was surgical. Cold. Director. No sugarcoat. Just a verbal boot to the ribs. I blinked. I've been saving since I was 15. That account, my college fund, it should have close to $12,000 in it. The room went still. My mom froze. Dad looked up finally and said, "We used it. Used. It. No warning, no heads up, not even a conversation." "Used it on what?" I asked, my voice cracking, even though I swore I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. "Andrew needed help," my mom said, folding her napkin like she was done with the subject. "His pre-law program wasn't cheap." I didn't speak. Couldn't. Andrew took a slow sip of soda. Didn't say a word. Let me be clear. I worked from the age of 15. Grocery store. Dishwasher. Hell, I even helped repaint fences in the neighborhood for side cash. Every dollar that didn't go to bills went into that account. I couldn't open one myself, not until I turned 18. So my dad offered to keep it safe under his name. He promised, "I won't touch a cent. It's yours." And now it was gone. I pushed my chair back. It made that screeching sound you hear before fights. "So you stole from me?" I said. Dad's face hardened. "Don't start with the drama." Mom chimed in, voice sharp. "You're not entitled to that money. This family made sacrifices for you. You're not the only one with needs." "Yeah," I snapped. "But I'm the only one pulling my weight." Her fork hit the plate. "Excuse me? I've worked for everything while Andrew sits on his ass pitching failed apps and burning other people's money? And you reward him, again, with my savings?" Andrew finally spoke. "Don't make this personal, man. You're not the only one trying." "Trying?" I barked. "You blew $2,000 on fake logos and Thai takeout, and now my future's gone." That's when Dad slammed his hand on the table. "You need to leave." Just like that. Not, "Go cool off." Not, "We'll talk later." Just leave. I stood there frozen. Mom crossed her arms. "We gave you a roof, food, clothes. And this is how you speak to us? Get out of this house if you think you're so grown." I stared at Andrew. Still sitting. Still silent. "Nothing to say?" I asked. "You heard all of this. You saw what they did. You gonna back me up?" He shrugged. That shrug. Worse than every insult. Every lie. Every stolen dollar. I grabbed my bag. No shoes. No jacket. Didn't matter. I wasn't staying. I walked out into the night with my breath fogging up and my chest on fire. It wasn't cold enough to freeze, but it felt colder than I've ever been. The porch light buzzed behind me. The door slammed shut like it couldn't wait to erase me. 10 minutes later, it creaked open. It was my mom. She didn't look at me, just tossed out two backpacks like she was dropping off trash. "One's got your stuff," she said. "The other's junk we didn't want. Go wherever you want." Then the door closed again. Final. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I just stood there like a glitch in their perfect little family software. Uninstall complete. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually I picked up those bags and walked down the street. No plan, no backup. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking, and called the only person I trusted, Jason. Jason was my best friend from high school. We used to trade notes in history class and roast the guidance counselor behind his back. Chill guy. Never asked too many questions. Never treated me like I was less. He picked up after 2 rings. I said, "Hey, you free?" He said, "Where are you?" "I'm coming." 30 minutes later, he pulled up in his beat-up Toyota. Faded paint, duct-taped side mirror, smell of old fries. Never been happier to see a junk car in my life. He didn't ask what happened. He just said, "Get in." That night, I crashed on a mattress in his living room, used a hoodie as a pillow. The ceiling fan clicked every 4 seconds. The place smelled like old laundry and ramen seasoning, but I felt more safe there than I ever had at home. I stared at the ceiling all night, wide awake, mind spinning. Not about revenge, not even about college. Just one thought. I'm on my own now, and no one's coming to help. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of bacon and eggs. Jason's mom was in the kitchen. "Are you staying for breakfast?" she asked. I nodded. She didn't press. Didn't ask about my parents. Just made me a plate like I was part of the house. First meal I'd had in weeks that didn't taste like resentment. 3 days later, I got a text from my grandfather. "Come over. I heard what happened." That's it. No emojis, no fluff. I took the bus to his place. He opened the door wearing a bathrobe and an old t-shirt that said, "Retired but dangerous." Didn't waste time. "Is it true?" I nodded. He sat down. "Your dad always was an idiot." That's the closest thing I ever heard him say that resembled anger. Then he leaned forward, hands steepled. "You're not staying with Jason forever. You're coming here." I blinked. "You're serious?" He nodded. "That house forgot how to be a family a long time ago. But you're still blood. You still matter." He cleared out his home office. Made it a room for me. Small, creaky bed. Old desk. Clean window. The walls were lined with books and random war memorabilia. I didn't care. It felt safe, like a base. He didn't baby me. Didn't give me money. But he gave me something I hadn't had in years. A choice. He said, "Go to college or don't. But don't give them the power to decide your worth." That sentence stuck. It became fuel. I applied for federal loans that same week. Got approved. Found a part-time job at a coffee shop. Worked mornings. Took classes at night. Biked to campus in freezing wind with holes in my gloves. Ate instant noodles. Studied until my eyes burned. But I never asked my parents for a damn thing again. They cut me off? Fine. I'd show them what a mistake really looked like, when it outruns them, outbuilds them, and never looks back. I was 18, broke, and sleeping on a borrowed mattress with 2 backpacks and no clue what came next. But I knew one thing for sure. If I went back to that house, I wasn't walking out a second time. So I didn't look back. I put my head down and moved. First thing I did was get a job at a coffee shop near campus. They didn't ask many questions. The manager liked that I showed up early, didn't complain, and knew how to keep my head down. I worked the opening shift, 6 a.m. to noon, cleaning tables, burning my fingers on espresso machines, sweeping sidewalks before the sun even came up. The pay was trash, but it was enough to keep me moving. Dorms were tight. I shared a room the size of a closet with a guy who snored like a dying engine and left his socks everywhere. Didn't matter. It was mine. I had a student ID, a schedule, a laptop that barely held a charge, and a list of classes that looked like a death sentence. I applied for every scholarship, grant, and low-interest loan I could find. Took whatever help I could get, but never from my parents. Not a single call, not even a fake birthday text. It was like I died and they forgot the funeral, which honestly made things easier. College wasn't some movie montage. It was brutal. During midterms, I'd sleep maybe 3 hours a night. When my shift ended, I'd run to class. Then go back to the coffee shop to close on weekends. I ate cup noodles in library stairwells. My clothes smelled like burnt milk and sweat. I missed more events than I can count. Some nights I'd come back to the dorms and just stare at the ceiling, muscles twitching from exhaustion, wondering if this was even worth it. But every time I thought about quitting, I saw their faces again. My mom's cold stare, my dad's smug tone, Andrew's silence. I remembered the PC money, the college fund, The night they tossed my bags like garbage, and suddenly I wasn't tired anymore. There was one person who stayed in touch. My Aunt Everly. She wasn't loud about it. Just little check-ins. A text before exams. A call after a rough week. She'd swing by once a month with hot food or cold meds. She never asked for details. Never pushed for gossip. Once I told her I was fine, and she said, "You don't have to be. Just keep going." She didn't take sides, but I could see the guilt in her eyes whenever my parents came up. She didn't make excuses for them. She didn't try to fix anything. She just showed up, quiet, consistent, and exactly when I needed it. Graduation came fast. I was 22, standing on a crowded lawn in a cheap gown, holding a degree with my name on it. The sun was out, the wind was light, and I didn't scan the crowd. I already knew they weren't there. They didn't even know the date. But Everly was. She sat 3 rows from the back with a bouquet of gas station flowers and a proud smile that said everything I never heard from my parents. I didn't cry. I didn't get emotional. I just looked at her, nodded, and said, "I made it." 3 months later, I got an offer from a mid-sized financial firm in Chicago. Salary was $72,000 starting, more than fair for a fresh grad. I accepted on the spot. I moved into a shared apartment with 2 other guys, one who played guitar at midnight and another who stole food like a raccoon. Didn't care. I was working. I was building. I tracked every dollar. Split paychecks into rent, loans, savings, and don't touch unless you're dying money. I skipped vacations, turned down parties, lived on black coffee and pre-packed rice bowls. Every dollar was ammo. Every hour was leverage. 4 years passed. By 26, I'd paid off every loan and had 5 figures in savings. No debt, no help, no shortcuts, just grind. The turning point wasn't dramatic. It came in a small moment. I was sitting in a team meeting, watching a bunch of execs debate over a company's liquidity crisis. They were going in circles, spewing jargon, but I saw the answer. Clear as day. I wrote it out, showed it to my supervisor after the meeting. He looked at it for 5 seconds and said, "Damn, this could have saved us an hour." I wasn't trying to impress. I was just wired different. I understood money because I had to fight for every cent. These guys played with it. I survived on it. That's when I started thinking, I could do this better. The idea of starting my own firm started as a whisper, but it didn't leave. I'd catch myself rewriting pitch decks in my head, rethinking how meetings were run. I started studying mergers in my free time, took online courses on business law, wrote plans in a Google Doc no one knew about. I didn't tell anyone, not even Jason. But every night after work, after the gym, after dinner, I'd stay up mapping it out. Clients, services, structure, numbers, no fantasy talk, no hype, just the math. Lynx Capital started as a file name on my laptop. It became real when I pulled the trigger. I took $20,000 out of savings, rented a small office, 3rd floor of a busted building, no windows, water stains on the ceiling. I hired 2 interns and a secretary from Craigslist, used folding chairs for the first 2 months. No website, just a mission. We don't sell fluff. We fix problems. Fast. Our first client came through a contact at my old job. Their books were a mess. Cash flow was bleeding. We cleaned it up in 6 weeks. After that, word spread. By the time I turned 30, Lynx Capital was pulling 7 figures. I wasn't rich yet, but I was finally undeniable. Then Thanksgiving happened. Out of nowhere, Everly called and asked me to come to dinner. Said the whole family would be there. My first instinct? Hang up. But she said one thing that changed my mind. It's time for them to see who you became, and who they lost. I didn't go for peace. I went to confront not with yelling, not with fists, with facts. I pulled up to her house in a clean black car. Nothing flashy, just sharp. Carried a bottle of wine that cost enough to make a point. Walked in and scanned the room. There they were, my parents, Andrew. Same smug posture, same fake smiles. When they saw me, they barely reacted. Andrew smirked. "Well, look who decided to crawl back." I didn't respond, didn't need to. I just watched, quiet, collected, and waited for the moment. Because this time, I wasn't the kid who got kicked out. I was the guy who held the hammer. The thing about returning to a place that once broke you, you don't feel small anymore. You feel surgical. I didn't show up to Thanksgiving wearing a crown. I showed up in a charcoal suit with quiet confidence. Everly opened the door before I knocked. "You came," she said, surprised but solid. I nodded. "You asked." Inside, the house was already loud. Clinking forks, shuffling chairs, TV humming in the background. But as soon as I stepped in, the energy shifted. Some faces turned. Some blinked like they'd seen a ghost. Others acted like I was just a cousin from out of town. My parents didn't even pretend to be awkward. My dad gave me a nod like I was the plumber here to fix the leak. My mom raised an eyebrow, then turned away like she smelled something stale. Andrew? He made sure to be louder than everyone else. Well, 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 he called out from across the room. Look who finally came home. That's a nice bottle, Maddie. You trying to impress us? I smiled. Short, clean. I don't try. I walked past him. Didn't break stride. Just enough to make it clear. I wasn't here to perform. I was here to observe. Everly made space at the dinner table. I sat, sipped my water, and listened. For 45 minutes, I said nothing. Just watched Andrew work the room like a wedding DJ, telling stories, name-dropping, tossing in buzzwords he barely understood. And now with this new client, my team's looking at closing a $2 million deal. That caught attention. People turned. Chatter dipped. My mother chimed in like she'd rehearsed it. It's with Lynx Capital. Very big name now. You've probably seen them in the business news. My father nodded proudly. One of the top financial firms in the state. I nearly laughed, but I didn't. Because I already knew what they didn't. The company Andrew was bragging about? Mine. He wasn't on the deal. He wasn't in the meetings. He wasn't even on the radar. I personally negotiated that contract. Spent 6 weeks going back and forth with Bennett and Rowe Capital's director. Andrew must have overheard something at work and decided to LARP his way into the credit. And here he was, spinning it like he'd just rescued the economy. I sipped my water. Let the room eat it up. The moment to strike would come. And when it did, it wouldn't be loud. It'd be surgical. That moment came when a relative, some aunt on my mom's side, turned to me between bites of mashed potatoes and asked, "And what about you, Matthew? What are you up to these days?" Dead silence. My dad's fork stopped midair. My mom looked down. Before I could open my mouth, my father cut in. Matthew hasn't done anything worth mentioning. I stayed quiet. He continued. He's always been a little off track. You know, not everyone finds their place in life. He was kind of, well, an accident. We only ever planned for one child. Someone gasped, someone else coughed. Andrew smirked. I didn't flinch. I'd heard that line too many times. But this time, someone else responded. Everly. She stood up slowly, set her glass down. That's enough. Her voice wasn't loud, but it sliced through the room like a mic drop. You don't feel embarrassed saying that in front of all these people? She turned, eyes sharp. That mistake you disowned? He's the one who built something out of nothing. He's the one who never took a cent from you after you kicked him out with a pair of torn-up backpacks. And you're sitting here acting like he owes you silence? She looked around the room, then landed on Andrew. And Matthew isn't just doing fine. He's the founder and CEO of Lynx Capital. Yes, that Lynx Capital. And he didn't need to use anyone's name to get there. The room froze. Andrew's face dropped like a bad poker hand. But he recovered fast. Cocky people always do. He stood up, tone dripping with fake laughter. That's ridiculous. Are we just making things up now? Matthew's the CEO? Please. I'm literally about to close a deal with them, and I've never even seen his name in the emails. He looked at me, smiling, daring me to flinch. Mom jumped in. This boy's always been a dreamer, always reaching for things out of his league. Dad followed. What's he ever built? Some paper company in a rented office? I waited. Let them finish. Then I said one sentence. You have 5 minutes to apologize. Dead quiet. Someone dropped a fork. My mom actually laughed. Apologize? For what? I stood up, calm, hands in my pockets. I wasn't going to embarrass anyone tonight, but since we're making things public, fine. I pulled out my phone, walked to the side of the room, and dialed. Everyone watched. It rang once, then connected. Jack, I said. It's Matthew. Quick question. You know Andrew Peterson? There was a pause. Who? He works at Bennett and Rowe. Says he's closing the Lynx Capital deal. Another pause. Then Jack's voice came back sharp and loud enough through the phone for people nearby to hear, that clown? Never even been in the room. Who gave him permission to speak on our behalf? I thanked him and hung up. 2 minutes later, Andrew's phone started ringing. He stared at the screen like it was on fire. He answered, walked away, but not fast enough. Jack's voice boomed through the speaker. You ever pretend to represent this company again? I'll have you blacklisted from every financial firm in the city. Do you understand me? Andrew's voice dropped to a whisper. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I sat back down. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. I looked at my father. Still think I haven't done anything worth mentioning? He stared at his plate. My mom opened her mouth. then shut it. Andrew returned, white as paper, sweating through his dress shirt. No one clapped. No one defended him. The silence? Delicious. Everly leaned over and whispered, "That was overdue." I stood up again, buttoned my jacket. "If you'll excuse me, I think I've had enough." She grabbed my wrist. "Thank you for showing up." I nodded. "Thank you for being the only one who ever did." And I walked out. 2 days later, the fallout landed. I was in a boardroom when the receptionist buzzed my line. "Mr. Peterson," she said carefully, "there's a group downstairs, 4 adults and 1 child. They say they're your family. They're asking to speak to you." I pulled up the lobby cam. There they were. Mom, Dad, Andrew, his wife, his kid, all of them. Andrew looked wrecked. I didn't take the call. I called my lawyer instead. 10 minutes later, he met them in the lobby. No smiles, no greetings, just paperwork. "I'm here on behalf of Mr. Matthew Peterson," he said, voice steady. "You are to cease all contact, verbal, physical, digital. Any further harassment will be met with legal consequences." Andrew tried to interrupt. Got shut down. Security walked them out without drama. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, Andrew got fired. Bennett and Rowe didn't make a scene. They just cut him loose. Security walked him out of the building before lunch. His badge deactivated. His access revoked. His name stripped from the email directory by 3 p.m. I didn't call it in. I didn't have to. Jack pulled the plug himself. By the end of the week, Andrew's name was unofficially blacklisted across every mid-level finance firm in the state. The guy went from wearing $400 loafers to begging recruiters to call him back. Didn't work. Nobody wants a fraud. Andrew tried to pivot, said he'd start his own consulting group, built a site on Wix, made a LinkedIn post full of buzzwords, 2 likes, no clients. 6 weeks later, the site disappeared. Then came the debts. Turns out Andrew had been living on borrowed money and fake promises. Car loan, personal loan, credit cards, a failed crypto side hustle, and a $40,000 business investment he took from a family friend who finally wanted it back. He couldn't pay any of it, so he did what golden children do when things collapse. He ran home to mommy and daddy. But the house wasn't safe either. Dad had taken out a second mortgage years ago to invest in Andrew's future. The payments were getting tight. Mom had stopped working after her hip surgery. Savings dried up. When the foreclosure notice hit the mailbox, my mom called my aunt first, begged her to help. My aunt said she didn't have the money. Then she called me, didn't even use my name. She opened with, "We're in trouble." No, "How are you?" No, "We're sorry." Just a straight shot beg, like I owed them something. I didn't yell. I didn't hang up. I listened. She said they were behind on everything, that my dad's credit was shot, that they were trying to find a smaller place, but no one would approve them without a cosigner, that Andrew was going through a hard time, that the baby was sick, that the rent prices were outrageous, that I wouldn't understand because I've never had to worry about money. That last part almost made me laugh. I said one sentence. "You made your decision when you sold my future for his." She didn't reply. I hung up. A week later, they showed up in person. The receptionist buzzed my office line again. "Mr. Peterson, your family is in the lobby." I didn't even look at the camera this time. I called legal. "Same guy as before." "Escalate it," I said. They got served that afternoon. A cease and desist with an additional clause. Any further uninvited contact would trigger legal action for harassment. I watched the footage afterward. They didn't cry. They didn't scream. They just stood there, stunned, then left. They never came back. 2 months later, I got a text from my aunt. One line. "They're staying in a shelter near the west side. House is gone. Credit's gone. They're broke." That was it. Andrew applied for bankruptcy. My father tried to drive for Uber, got denied for insurance reasons. My mom filed for early Social Security and got denied on a technicality. The shelter let them stay for 30 days. Then they were rotated out. They tried couch hopping. No one wanted them. Jason sent me a photo once. My parents outside a public library with 2 plastic bags and no plan. Dad sitting on a bench, staring into nothing. Mom trying to keep her phone charged off a wall socket. Andrew was nowhere to be seen. Guess he bailed when things got real. 3 weeks after that, I got a letter. Handwritten. No return address. Folded 3 times. It said, "We made mistakes. We know, but we're still your parents. Please don't let us die like this." It wasn't signed. I recognized my father's handwriting. I didn't respond. I didn't shred it either. I stapled it to the back of my old college acceptance letter, the one they shrugged off. Filed it. Proof. That's all it was. My boss pulled my promotion. After 15 years of hard work saying, "You're not VP material Be grateful for the experience we gave you. So I took a competitor's VP offer 2 days later. Everything blew up. Sup Reddit. So spent 15 years being the guy everyone called when things went sideways. Turns out that was exactly why they'd never promote me. I, 43 male, spent a decade and a half as senior regional coordinator at Bridgewater Freight, being the guy everyone called when things went sideways. Blizzard shutting down mountain passes during peak shipping season? Call Cole. Wildfire smoke grounding half our fleet in the Pacific Northwest? Get Cole on the phone. Major manufacturing client threatening to walk because someone in upper management fumbled their account review? Cole will smooth it over. Don't worry about it. And I did. Every single time. Not because I was desperate for a pat on the head, but because I actually gave a damn about the work. Like last February when my boss Warren, vice president of operations, and the guy who'd been dangling my promotion for 2 years, personally promised Hartley we could handle their expanded shipping volume during their production ramp-up. He made the commitment without checking capacity, without reviewing routes, without asking anyone who actually understood logistics. I found out about it 3 days before launch, when their operations director called me directly because Warren wasn't returning his emails. I spent 72 hours rebuilding schedules, negotiating with carriers, and creating a contingency system that kept us from defaulting on a $28 million contract. Warren presented it to the board as his strategic planning. Got a bonus for it. I'd built routing systems from scratch that saved this company millions in penalty fees and operational inefficiencies. Systems that Warren couldn't explain if his life depended on it. Warren knew all of this. He'd watched me do it for years while he sat in executive meetings, taking credit for the stability I created. The man couldn't coordinate a 2-car funeral without someone holding his hand, but somehow he was vice president of operations, while I held the title of senior regional coordinator. A title that sounded impressive on paper until you realized it came with all the responsibility, but none of the actual power. All the stress, but none of the compensation. All the expectations, but none of the recognition. The promotion to VP had been dangled in front of me for 2 years. 2 years of, we just need board approval, and the timing has to be right, and you're definitely next in line, Cole. I'd started documenting everything around month 6. Not because I'm paranoid, because I'm not stupid. There's a difference. Every conversation went into a folder. Every email promising next quarter got saved. Calendar invites. Performance reviews. The VP position showing up as an approved line item in budget projections. I kept it all. That Friday afternoon at 3 p.m., sitting in Warren's corner office with its fake plants and motivational posters about teamwork, I watched him deliver the news like he was reading off a grocery list. Board decided to pause the VP expansion. Economic pressures. Nobody's fault. Just the way things go sometimes. The usual corporate word salad designed to make getting screwed over sound like a natural disaster, rather than a deliberate choice. Pause, I repeated. My voice was calm, almost friendly. I've learned that nothing unsettles people more than staying calm when they're expecting you to lose it. Warren, you told me the promotion was already approved. You sent me a calendar invite 3 weeks ago. Subject line: VP Transition Planning. Cole. I still have it. He looked caught for just a second. Like a kid who forgot his teacher actually checks homework. He recovered fast, though. Shrugged. Like I'd asked him why the vending machine was out of Snickers, instead of why 15 years of promises were being flushed down the toilet. Things happen, Cole. Priorities shift. Budgets get reallocated. We all have to adapt. Adapt. That word hit different. I'd been adapting for 15 years. Adapting to doing work 2 levels above my pay grade. Adapting to every late-night emergency the executives couldn't handle. Adapting to watching less qualified people get promoted because they played golf with the right guys or had certain other qualities Warren found valuable. I asked about compensation. If the title was delayed, surely the salary could at least be adjusted to reflect the responsibilities I'd already taken on. Warren's response came with this look on his face. Dismissive. Almost amused. You're excellent at being the guy we call, Cole. That's not executive material. The words landed like a slap. 15 years of leading through every crisis this company had faced, and apparently I was just the guy they called. Not a leader. Just reliable. We have fresh talent coming up, he continued, checking his phone mid-sentence. People with modern thinking, strategic vision. You're not entitled to a title just because you've been here a long time. Fresh talent, modern thinking, strategic vision. Every corporate buzzword that meant absolutely nothing while simultaneously meaning everything. He set his phone down, looked at me like I was wasting his time, and delivered the line that made everything click. If this isn't working for you, you can always explore other options. But if you want to stay, Be grateful you have stability. Keep doing what you're doing. He stood up. Meeting over. You're not the future here, Cole. You're the infrastructure. Close the door on your way out. I looked at Warren, really looked at him, and saw it clearly for the first time. This wasn't about budgets. It wasn't about timing. This was about control. If they promoted me, they'd have to pay me what I was worth. If they kept me hungry and hopeful, they could squeeze every ounce of value out of me indefinitely. And that VP seat wasn't paused. Something in my gut told me it was reserved. Something changed in me right then. Not dramatic or anything. Just this weird sense of clarity. Like I'd been looking at everything through a dirty window, and someone finally wiped it clean. Years of managing crisis situations had taught me the value of keeping your cards close. Let them think they've won. It makes the fall harder. Thank you for the update, I said, standing up. Voice calm, face neutral, giving him absolutely nothing to read. Warren nodded, probably thinking I'd swallowed it like he expected. He had no idea he'd just lit the fuse on his own career. I walked out of Warren's office and headed straight to my own. Closed the door. Sat down at my desk and started thinking about every piece of leverage I had. See, most people in my position would go home, complain to their wife, maybe start casually job hunting while continuing to show up and give their best. Because that's what we're trained to do. Be professional. Take the high road. Don't burn bridges. But bridges work both ways. And some bridges need to burn so you can stop traffic from crossing them. My phone buzzed. Text from my wife, Megan. How did it go? So excited for you. I stared at those words for a long time. Thought about my kids at home, probably wondering if Dad was going to come back with good news. Thought about my parents and the conversation we'd had last month about their prescription costs. Thought about 15 years of early mornings and late nights, and missed soccer games and promises to Megan that next year would be different. I didn't respond to her text. Not yet. I needed to think. I started opening emails I'd been ignoring for months. Recruiters, former colleagues who'd moved on to other companies, competitors who'd noticed my work at industry conferences, all of them saying variations of the same thing. You're wasting your time at Bridgewater. They don't deserve you. Come talk to us whenever you're ready. A recruiter had emailed twice in the past 3 months. Your crisis management presentation at the Denver Summit was exactly what we're looking for in our next regional director. Base salary starts at $140, full benefits, equity options. A former colleague who'd left Bridgewater 5 years ago and now ran operations at a competitor had reached out in August. Stop letting Warren take credit for your systems. We'll actually pay you what you're worth and put your name on your own work. I'd brushed them all off, every single one, because I'd believed the promise. I'd trusted that 15 years of loyalty would be rewarded with something other than a pat on the head and a suggestion to keep waiting. One email stopped me cold, 3 weeks old, sitting in my inbox like it had been waiting for exactly this moment, from Nathan. I knew the name. Everyone in freight logistics knew the name. He'd built Apex from a regional carrier into a powerhouse that was eating market share from companies 3 times their size. The guy was legendary for 2 things: operational excellence and actually treating his people like they mattered. The subject line was simple. Would you consider a conversation? I clicked it open. Cole, I've followed your work for years. Your operational strategies at Bridgewater have become reference points in our hiring and training programs. The winter logistics protocol you developed in 2019, we literally teach it to new coordinators. If you're ever open to leading at a higher level, we have a VP seat that needs someone with your instincts. No games. Just a conversation between 2 people who care about this industry. No maybes. Just a direct statement of value from someone who'd actually done his homework. I typed a response before I could talk myself out of it. Nathan, thank you for reaching out. I'm available this weekend if you still have time. Sent it. 3:38 p.m. Exactly 38 minutes after Warren told me to stop acting like I was owed something. Nathan responded within 15 minutes. Tomorrow morning, 9:30 a.m. Apex headquarters. Been waiting for your yes. When I got home that night, Megan took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. The kids were in the other room, so she pulled me into the kitchen and waited. I told her everything. The meeting, Warren's shrug, the pause that wasn't really a pause, the comments about me not being leadership material. All of it. She didn't say much at first, just listened. When I was done, she asked one question. What do you want to do? I want to stop being someone's backup plan. She nodded slowly. Then do it. You've given them 15 years, Cole. They've shown you who they are. Believe them. That was it. 15 years of marriage, and she still knew exactly when to push and when to just have my back. I told her about Nathan's email, about the meeting tomorrow. Go. she said. Hear what he has to say, and keep your eyes open at work. Sometimes the truth comes out on its own when everything starts falling apart. I went to bed that night knowing I was standing at a crossroads. For the first time in 15 years, I actually slept well. Apex's headquarters looked like it belonged in a different universe than Bridgewater's outdated brick building, with its flickering fluorescent lights and carpet that hadn't been replaced since the Clinton administration. This was all glass and steel, clean lines, modern everything. The kind of place where you could tell just by walking through the lobby that things actually worked the way they were supposed to. The receptionist greeted me by name before I even introduced myself. At Bridgewater, the front desk couldn't remember my name even after 15 years. Nathan met me outside the conference room. Firm handshake, direct eye contact, zero pretense. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, but he had the presence of someone who'd earned every bit of his reputation. No fake smiles, no corporate small talk about the weather. We sat down and he opened a folder. Inside were printouts of conference presentations I'd given, a process diagram I'd shared at a regional logistics summit, articles I'd contributed to industry publications, work I'd shared because it was good work, and good work gets noticed eventually. I've studied your work for years, he said. The winter logistics protocol you presented at the 2019 Western Freight Conference? We adapted it for our own operations and cut delay penalties by 60%. The crisis management framework you published in Logistics Quarterly? Required reading for our new coordinators. You've been sharing best practices with the industry for free while Bridgewater took the credit, but they'll never give you the authority to lead because your leadership threatens theirs. People like Warren need you to stay exactly where you are, so they can keep pretending they're the ones holding things together. Direct, honest. No corporate doublespeak. I appreciated that. I appreciated. You don't know what happened yesterday, I said. Don't need to. He leaned back in his chair. I know how companies like Bridgewater treat the people who make them successful. They mistake loyalty for weakness. Let me guess. Another delay? Another excuse about timing or budgets? Maybe a suggestion to be patient? Close. Told me I'm not leadership material, just good at operations. Nathan almost smiled. Not smugly, just like someone recognizing a familiar pattern. That's not an assessment of your abilities, Cole. That's them protecting their own mediocrity. They can't promote you without exposing how little they actually contribute. He slid a folder across the table. Not a promise. Not an invitation to wait for budget approvals or board meetings. An actual contract, printed out, ready to sign. Vice President of Regional Operations. Full authority over staffing, strategy, and implementation. Salary 40% above what I was making at Bridgewater. Performance equity that would vest over 3 years. A signing bonus that nearly made me choke. And something I'd never had before. The freedom to build my team without interference from people who didn't understand the work. I read through it. Looked solid. More than solid, actually. When do you need an answer? Today would be ideal, Nathan said. But I understand if you need time to think it through. I didn't need time. I'd already spent 15 years thinking it through. I picked up the pen and signed. Nathan shook my hand. One more thing. If you know good people who deserve better than Bridgewater can give, I'm ready to hire. Good talent tends to cluster around people who treat it well. I thought about my team. The senior coordinators who'd been carrying the heaviest operational accounts for years without recognition. The specialists whose logistics solutions had saved Bridgewater hundreds of thousands while supervisors took credit. The steady, reliable people holding together technical coordination that half the management team didn't understand. I didn't make any promises. Didn't need to, because I knew something Warren had never figured out. Loyalty goes both ways. And Bridgewater was running out of one while handing out the other to people who hadn't earned either. I spent Sunday afternoon doing something I'd never done before at Bridgewater. I documented my exit properly. Most people write a 2-sentence resignation and call it a day. I wrote a transition memo. Professional. Thorough. The kind of thing that looks helpful on the surface, but actually exposes every gap you're about to leave behind. The memo covered everything. Critical operational processes I'd built and maintained. Winter routing protocols and where the documentation lived. Client escalation chains and relationship histories. System access I controlled and how to transfer it. Risk assessments for upcoming shipping seasons. Knowledge gaps that would need to be addressed. Upcoming renewals and negotiations in progress. At the end, I added one line. I'm available for consulting at $450 per hour after my notice period ends, should you need assistance with transition planning or operational continuity. I knew they wouldn't pay it. That wasn't the point. The point was creating a paper trail that showed I'd tried to help, while simultaneously making it crystal clear just how much institutional knowledge was walking out the door. Then I wrote my resignation. Professional, clean. 2 weeks notice. Thanked them for the opportunity. Didn't mention Warren, didn't mention broken promises, didn't mention any of the reasons I was actually leaving. I sent both documents Sunday night at 11:47 p.m. Email to HR, CC to Warren, BCC to my personal account for documentation purposes. At 11:52 p.m., I got an automated email. Your Bridgewater Freight account has been disabled. 5 minutes. They'd cut my access in 5 minutes. 15 years and they couldn't wait until morning to flip the switch. That told me everything I needed to know about how they viewed me. Not as an asset. As a liability the moment I became inconvenient. Warren called my cell at 12:03 a.m. I didn't answer. He called again at 12:17 a.m. Again at 12:34 a.m. Left a voicemail that I deleted without listening to. He sent an email at 1:18 a.m. with the subject line, urgent, need to discuss immediately. I marked it as read and went to bed. Then I turned off my work phone and spent Monday morning with my family, eating pancakes and watching cartoons with the kids before heading to my first day at Apex. My first day at Apex started at 8:32 a.m. New office, clean desk, window overlooking the district. No crisis waiting for me when I walked in. No panicked voicemails from drivers stranded on mountain passes. No Warren hovering outside my door pretending he was the one keeping things functional. I'd barely logged into my system when my personal phone started buzzing. A continuous stream of notifications that told me something significant was happening at Bridgewater. The first message was a forwarded email. One of my senior coordinators had submitted his resignation at 8:07 a.m., effective in 2 weeks. He'd told me once during a brutal late-night shift, "If you ever leave, Cole, I'm right behind you. I'm only here because you make it bearable." I never thought he meant it literally. Apparently he did. 9:12 a.m. Another forward. A second coordinator's resignation. Shorter, colder, zero attempt to dress it up with professional niceties. 2 sentences. I am resigning effective in 2 weeks. Please process my final paycheck accordingly. 9:55 a.m. A third team member. His letter was the simplest. I'm grateful for the experience. It's time to grow elsewhere. 3 resignations in 2 hours. I hadn't said a word to any of them. Hadn't recruited them. Hadn't hinted. Hadn't done anything except leave. But they'd been waiting for someone to go first. My phone rang at 10:23 a.m. Warren. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I wanted to hear what angle he'd try. Cole. No greeting. Just my name like an accusation. We need to talk about what you did. Warren. 3 resignations this morning. 3 senior coordinators. HR's already asking if you spoke to them. They're adults. They made their own decisions. Hold on. Typing sounds. Muffled voices in the background. Don't play stupid. You leave Sunday night, and by Monday my entire operations team walks out? This looks bad, and you know it. I sent you a detailed transition memo. A memo. He laughed without humor. Someone knocked on his door. Not now. Cole, you think a memo covers 15 years of... Look, I'm not accusing you of anything, but this looks coordinated. I kept my voice level. If you think you have a case, file it. Don't make me escalate this. The board is furious. HR is literally in my office right now documenting everything. When they ask why this happened, I'm telling them what I saw. This looks bad, and you know it. Don't take our stuff with you. You should tell them the truth, Warren, that you had 15 years to retain the people who built your systems. His voice went colder. Stop talking like you don't get it. You walked out. You sabotaged transition. These are facts. When the board asks about operational failures, I'm making sure they understand where this came from. Is there anything else? Yeah. He paused. His phone was buzzing in the background. People talk. This follows you. You really want your name attached to this kind of exit? I documented my work, offered transition support, and moved on. If the company can't function without one person, that's a structural problem you should have addressed years ago. After everything we did for you. His voice cracked slightly. I'm trying to protect you here. Get on a call with HR. Tell them you didn't recruit anyone. Say you had no idea they were leaving. No. Cole, this can get ugly. Real ugly. Don't say I didn't warn you. You'll hear from people who write emails. Click. Megan looked up from her coffee. She'd heard the tone in my voice from the other room. Warren? Yeah. Trying to scare me. Said I poached his staff? Did you? No, I left. They followed. There's a difference. She studied my face. You okay? I'm fine. He's bluffing. And even if he's not, I documented everything. Good. Then let him try. Here's the part nobody tells you about how things fall apart. It doesn't blow up. It just starts failing quietly. An email unanswered because nobody knows who handles that account. A shipment delayed because the backup route knowledge walked out the door. A client question bounced between 4 people, none of whom have the institutional knowledge to answer it. By Tuesday, I was getting messages from employees I hadn't spoken to in years. People staring at systems they didn't understand and problems they couldn't solve. The messages all had the same energy. Panic dressed as professional inquiry. Cole, nobody knows how the winter reroute protocol works. Warren is trying to reverse engineer it from your notes, but he's missing context. The carrier escalation chain isn't working. We've missed 3 priority deadlines, and clients are calling the executive line. Hartley's rep called screaming. Nobody knows their backup contact procedures. Warren told them to call back tomorrow. I didn't respond. I already knew what happens when you yank the spine out of a system built by people leadership never bothered to understand. Wednesday brought the first public client complaint. A manufacturing client posted on an industry forum about a delayed shipment Bridgewater couldn't explain. The new coordinator routed it through a carrier I'd specifically blacklisted after they'd failed us twice during winter conditions. The information was in my handoff documentation, highlighted even. The carrier missed the delivery window by 9 hours. A $37 million client sent a formal complaint to the executive team. $41,000 in penalty fees. That's when Warren made his first real mistake. Not the routing failure. That was incompetence. The mistake was who he put in charge of fixing it. The interim support coordinator. Someone from the analyst pool. Suddenly sitting in emergency planning meetings, making routing decisions, fielding client calls. Warren positioned it as temporary operational coverage. But everyone with eyes knew what it really was. The same analyst who'd been walking past his office for the past year. The one he'd been tracking with his eyes when he thought nobody was paying attention. Strategic operations analyst on paper. 18 months of tenure. 0 practical logistics experience. And now she was running crisis operations. People started talking. The staff who'd stayed were comparing notes. She showed up around 10 most mornings. Left by 4:30. Made real-time decisions that cost thousands per mistake. And Warren covered for every single one. The second disaster was worse because it was preventable. I documented an upcoming highway closure that would impact 3 major shipping corridors. Built alternate routes, coordinated with carriers, set up contingency protocols. The notes were clear, the solutions ready. All anyone had to do was follow the plan. She saw the notes, decided the alternate routes were inefficient, and sent trucks down the main highway anyway. They hit the construction zone and sat for 14 hours. 3 missed deliveries. $68,000 in combined penalties. When the operations team pushed back, when they tried to explain why the protocols existed, Warren shut them down. Sent a company-wide email praising her steady hand during transition challenges, while privately scrambling to contain the damage. By 9 calendar days after I left, 2 more coordinators quit. Both cited management concerns. Both had been with Bridgewater over 5 years. The third disaster came from Hartley. She sent an email to their logistics director that was meant to project confidence but revealed how little she understood their account. Got their shipping priorities backwards. Referenced protocols we didn't use. Made promises about capacity we couldn't deliver. The logistics director forwarded it to 3 people with 1 line. Who is this person, and why is she making decisions about our routing? That email reached Bridgewater's executive team within an hour. Client confidence was evaporating. Operations metrics were in freefall. The team was hemorrhaging talent. And Warren's solution was keeping the same unqualified person in place while hoping the bleeding would stop on its own. 12 calendar days after I left brought the hammer. Hartley terminated their contract. $28 million annual, gone. A second major client followed 3 days later. Suspended their contract pending operational review, then canceled outright. $31 million annual. The industry talks. When a major freight coordinator's operation implodes, everyone knows within 48 hours. Clients considering Bridgewater suddenly had serious concerns. Deals that were 90% closed fell apart. Competitors started circling. And the resignations kept coming. 15 calendar days after I left, another departure. Day 16, 2 more. Day 19, still bleeding. By the end of week 3, 9 key staff members had walked. The people who knew how things actually worked. Warren kept sending company-wide emails about perseverance and teamwork, and how the transition team was doing great work under challenging circumstances. Nobody believed him anymore. Not the staff, not the clients, not the board members asking pointed questions about what the heck was happening. The collapse wasn't dramatic. It was systematic. 1 missed deadline became 3 became 10. One lost client became 2, became 5. One resignation became 3, became 9. Somewhere in all that math, Bridgewater went from stable operation to company in crisis. All because Warren had spent 15 years prioritizing the wrong things. The second call came 3 weeks after Warren told me I wasn't leadership material. When I saw his name at 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday, I knew exactly what it was. I'd been waiting for it, watching the collapse from a distance and wondering how long before panic overrode pride. I let it ring 3 times. Not out of spite. I just wanted him to feel every second of that wait. Warren. Cole. His voice had changed. Less controlled, more raw. The sound of a man who'd been fighting fires all week and was finally admitting he couldn't put them out. We need to talk. Okay? Silence. Like he'd expected me to fill the space or make this easier. I didn't. In person, I can come to you. Anywhere you want. Today, tomorrow, whenever works. Warren offering to come to me. Warren, who'd never left his office for anyone below executive level. Phone is fine. What do you need? He exhaled. We need you back, Cole. Operations are in crisis. Major clients are under review. Hartley terminated. We're bleeding clients and I can't. He stopped himself. Regrouped. The board wants to reinstate your VP promotion. Immediately. Paperwork ready by Monday. I didn't respond. And we'll adjust the compensation package. Significant increase over what we discussed. Equity options, performance bonuses. Whatever you were making at Apex, we'll beat it by 20%. 20%. 3 weeks ago, I wasn't executive material. Now he had 20% more than a competitor's salary just lying around. We'll also restructure your authority. Complete operational control. No oversight. You'd report directly to the board, not through my office. Final say on all regional decisions. The promotion he'd dangled for 2 years. The salary he'd claimed didn't exist. The authority he'd spent 15 years making sure I never had. All of it right now, just come back and fix what we broke. Warren, I sent you a detailed transition memo 2 weeks ago. Did you read it? Pause. We reviewed it, but did you reach out about the consulting offer? $450 an hour for transition assistance? That was in the memo too. Cole, we don't need a consultant. We need you. Back in your role, leading the team. I don't have a role there anymore. I resigned. I'm VP at Apex now. Then we'll match your title. Full Vice President, Operations. Not coordinator, not regional lead. The real position. The one you should have had years ago. Should have had years ago. He actually said it. If I should have had it years ago, why didn't I? Silence. The heavy kind that tells you someone just walked into a trap they set themselves. Things are different now. The situation has changed. You mean you need me now? That's what changed. 3 weeks ago, you had me and didn't want to pay for it. Now you don't have me and you'll pay anything. That's not a change in my value, Warren. That's just you finally understanding what it was worth all along. Cole, please, let's talk about this. 30 days. Come back for 30 days. Help us stabilize. Train the new coordinators. After that, if you still want to leave, we'll work out a transition that makes sense. 30 days. Get me back in the building. Bury me in emergencies. Let guilt and obligation do their work. 30 days becomes 60, becomes permanent. I'm not interested in coming back, Warren. Not for 30 days. Not for any amount of money. I'm building something at Apex. Something that actually values the work I do. The interim team is being restructured. We're bringing in experienced coordinators. People who actually know the systems. You wouldn't have to deal with any of the transition chaos. Interim team. Not her specifically. Just vague enough to sound like a business decision, while still admitting his solution had failed spectacularly. That's an internal staffing decision, Warren. It has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with... He stopped. Look, I know I made mistakes. I know the timing was bad. I know I should have handled your promotion differently. But we can fix this. We can make it right. No, you can't make it right. You can make it profitable for me, maybe. You can make it expensive for you, definitely. But you can't make it right. That opportunity closed 3 weeks ago when you told me I wasn't leadership material. Cole, I sent you the transition memo. I offered consulting at a fair rate. You have options for moving forward. They just don't include me coming back. The board is asking questions about the departures, about the contracts. They're bringing in auditors. They're going to want to know why this happened. What I'm going to tell them. I felt something cold settle in my chest. He was trying to make his investigation sound like my problem. Tell them the truth. Tell them you had 15 years to promote the people who built your stability, and you chose not to. Tell them you prioritized other things. Tell them whatever you want, Warren. I've got nothing to hide. I didn't mean, that's not what I meant. I know what you meant, and the answer is still no. Good luck with the transition. I hung up before he could respond. Megan texted that night. You okay? Yeah. Warren called, offered me everything. Turned it down. Good. You deserve better than everything from people who should have given you something when it mattered. She was right, as always. What I didn't know during that call was that Bridgewater's board had already started asking the questions Warren was afraid of. When you lose nearly $60 million in contracts in 3 weeks, boards get curious. When 9 key employees resign in the same period, they get investigative. The company brought in outside auditors the day after Warren called. Standard crisis response. They were looking for operational failures, process breakdowns, anything that could explain the collapse. What they found was a pattern. Warren had been making staffing and promotion decisions that didn't align with performance metrics. Projects assigned to unqualified people. High performers passed over. Resources allocated in ways that made no operational sense. When they started looking at email records, they found communication patterns that raised immediate red flags. Nothing I sent them. Nothing I leaked. Just standard corporate due diligence uncovering what happens when people get sloppy with company systems. The board's legal team got involved. HR launched a formal investigation. The kind that happens when a company is trying to understand if leadership decisions were made for business reasons or personal ones. I found out about all of this later. From people still at Bridgewater watching the fallout. 4 weeks after Warren told me I wasn't leadership material, Bridgewater's HR called and asked if I'd participate in an exit interview. Standard procedure, they said. Just trying to understand the recent departures. I almost said no, but something made me agree. The interview was conducted by an outside firm, not Bridgewater's internal HR. That told me everything about how serious this had gotten. The interviewer was professional, thorough, asked good questions about my decision to leave. Most of it was standard. Compensation, work environment, relationship with management. Then she asked about the VP promotion. I kept it factual. Told her about the 2-year timeline, the repeated delays, the meeting where Warren said the position was paused. I mentioned the calendar invite he'd sent 3 weeks prior titled VP Transition Planning, and how that didn't align with his claim that the board had paused expansion. Then she asked if I had any concerns about decision-making processes at Bridgewater. I thought about the analyst showing up late, leaving early, producing little of substance, somehow being protected. About Warren's eyes tracking her past his glass door. About her being shoved into my role despite zero operational experience, then watching Warren defend her while the company bled money. About 15 years of decisions that made no business sense. You should review conflicts of interest in staffing and promotion decisions, I said carefully, particularly around the VP role and subsequent interim operational assignments. That was it. One line. No accusations, no details, no drama. Just a professional observation any competent investigator would follow up on. The interviewer made a note, thanked me for my time. The call ended. I went back to work at Apex and didn't think much about it. 2 weeks later, Warren was terminated. Not quietly resigned, not gracefully transitioned, terminated for cause. The official statement cited, conduct inconsistent with company values and fiduciary responsibilities. Industry insiders filled in the blanks. The investigation had uncovered a relationship. The interim coordinator shoved into operations? Her name was Maya. She'd been hired as a strategic operations analyst 18 months earlier, and the audit trail showed a pattern of preferential treatment from day one. Email chains where Warren discussed her career advancement, including explicit references to planning a promotion once he could manufacture enough credentials to make it defensible. Calendar patterns showing private meetings that had nothing to do with company business. Expense reports that raised questions. Communication records that made the relationship undeniable. The emails where Warren called me a placeholder. The accelerated project assignments that made no operational sense. Everything that proved his decisions weren't about business. Maya was gone the same day. Her position eliminated, and nobody seemed too broken up about it. Last I heard, she was explaining the gap in her resume to recruiters who'd already heard the story. Freight logistics is a small world. Word travels fast. Warren tried to fight the termination, made noise about wrongful dismissal. The board's lawyers responded with a detailed summary of everything they'd found. He dropped the lawsuit within a week. Smart move, the only one he'd made in years. His wife filed for divorce 3 weeks later. She had apparently hired her own investigators once the company audit started making headlines. Turns out boards aren't the only ones who care about documentation. Guess I wasn't leadership material, but at least I kept my job. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks. This story is titled, My Parents Begged Me to Come Home for Christmas After They Took My College Fund to Pay for My Sister. So I took my revenge and now they are begging. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hey guys, 28 female, need to get this off my chest. It's kind of a long story, but I need to write it down somewhere. I'm Mel, and I haven't talked to my parents or my sister, I'll call her Jen, in 8 years. Not really sure how to start this, but here goes. I work at this big investment firm downtown. You know those tall buildings with the fancy lobbies where everyone's wearing suits? Yeah, one of those. I'm good at my job, saved up enough to buy a place, and I'm married to Dan, 32 male, who's this really great lawyer. Honestly, life's pretty good now, but it wasn't always like this. Growing up, it was always about my sister Jen. She's 3 years older, and my parents treated her like she was perfect. Every little thing she did was amazing to them. Got a C+ in math? At least she tried her best. Dropped out of college? College isn't for everyone. Got married at 19 to some guy she met at a gas station? Young love is so beautiful. Meanwhile, I was busting my butt getting straight A's, working part-time at this boring office supply store, and trying to get into a good college. But nothing I did was ever enough. Like, I could have discovered the cure for cancer and they would have been like, "That's nice, honey, but did you see Jen's new hair color?" The real problem started when I got my college acceptance letter. I had a partial scholarship to study finance, which was huge for me. I'd been planning this forever. My grandma, Dad's mom, had left some money specifically for my education. It wasn't a ton, but combined with my scholarship and savings, it would have covered everything. I remember running home that day, thinking maybe, just maybe, they'd finally be proud of me. Found my mom sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like always. Dad was in his usual chair watching TV. "Mom, Dad, I got in." I showed them the letter. Mom barely looked up. "That's nice, honey. So, can we talk about the college fund? You know, Grandma's money." That's when Dad turned off the TV. Never a good sign. "About that," he started, doing that thing where he wouldn't look at me. "We had to use that money for something else." I felt like someone had dumped ice water on me. "What do you mean?" "Well, Jen's wedding is coming up, and you know how expensive weddings are these." I just stood there, trying to process what I was hearing. They'd taken my college fund, the money my grandma left specifically for my education, and spent it on Jen's third wedding. Yeah, you read that right. Third. She'd already had 2 failed marriages by 23. I lost it. Started yelling about how unfair it was, how they always picked Jen over me. Mom got defensive, saying I was being selfish and should be happy for my sister. Dad just sat there looking uncomfortable, like he always did when there was conflict. That night, I packed my bags and left. Only took what could fit in my car. I drove to my Aunt Pat's house. She's my mom's sister, but they barely talk because Mom says she's too opinionated. Translation, Aunt Pat actually calls them out on their BS. Aunt Pat took me in without question. Found out later that she'd been saving money for her son's college fund, but he'd passed away in a car accident a few years before. She offered to help me with college, but I only accepted on the condition that I'd pay back every cent. College was rough. Really rough. I was taking full-time classes while working at this cafe that always smelled like burnt coffee. Had to maintain a certain GPA to keep my scholarship, so I basically lived in the library. But you know what? I did it. Graduated with honors, got a job at the investment firm where I still work, and paid back every cent to Aunt Pat within 2 years. That's also where I met Dan. He was handling some legal stuff for the firm, and we kept running into each other in the break room. He asked me out for coffee, and the rest is history. We got married last year, bought a house, and things were finally going well. I hadn't talked to my family in all this time. Like, zero contact. No calls, no emails, nothing. Jen had my number but never used it. My parents sent a card when I graduated, probably because Aunt Pat told them, but that was it. So yeah, that's the background. Had to explain all this so what happened next makes sense. But it all started last Christmas. I know I should have seen it coming because my Aunt Pat was acting weird for days. Like, she'd start saying something on the phone then stop herself. But I was too busy with work to really notice. Dan and I had this tradition of spending Christmas Eve at Aunt Pat's. She makes these amazing cinnamon rolls that make the whole house smell incredible, and we usually just hang out, watch movies, and open one present each at midnight. It's chill, you know? So we show up at her place around 6 p.m. I'm carrying this huge tray of my attempt at sweet potato casserole, probably not as good as hers, but I try. And Dan's got the gifts. The moment I opened the door, I knew something was wrong. There were too many coats on the rack, too many shoes by the door. Then I heard them. My mom's laugh, my dad's voice, My sister Jen talking loudly about something. I literally froze in the doorway. Dan walked right into me because I stopped so suddenly. The casserole almost went flying. 8 years. It had been 8 years since I'd seen any of them. And there they were, sitting in Aunt Pat's living room like they belonged there. Mom's hair was mostly gray now. She used to dye it religiously. Dad had gotten pretty heavy. And Jen, well, Jen looked exactly the same, except now she had 2 kids I'd never met clinging to her legs. Aunt Pat came rushing over, looking like she was about to cry. Mel, I'm so sorry. They just showed up an hour ago. I tried to call, but your phone went straight to voicemail. My phone was in my bag, on silent cause of work stuff. Great timing, right? I couldn't move. Like physically couldn't make my feet work. Dan put his hand on my back and whispered, "We can leave if you want." But before I could answer, my mom spotted me. Mel, sweetheart. She came rushing over like we'd seen each other yesterday. Tried to hug me and everything. I stepped back so fast I bumped into Dan again. What are you doing here? My voice came out weird. Too high. It's Christmas. Mom said it like that explained everything. Family should be together on Christmas. Dad was still sitting in his chair, doing that awkward half-wave thing. Jen was busy with her kids, but I could see her watching me. The kids, God, I didn't even know their names then, looked confused. The older one, a boy around 7, whispered something to Jen, probably asking who I was. I went straight to the kitchen. Needed to put down the casserole before I dropped it. Needed to breathe. The kitchen had always been my safe space at Aunt Pat's house. I'd spent so many hours here doing homework or helping her bake. Dan followed me in. He's good like that. Always knows when I need backup. You okay? I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak. Aunt Pat came in looking miserable. They showed up saying they wanted to make things right. I told them it wasn't a good idea to surprise you like this. But you know your mother. Yeah, I did know my mother. Queen of doing whatever she wanted and dealing with the consequences later. I could hear the kids playing in the living room now. Someone had turned on Christmas music. It all felt so wrong, like I'd walked into some parallel universe where the last 8 years hadn't happened. Should we go? Dan asked again. He was already reaching for his car keys. I almost said yes, really wanted to say yes. But then I looked at Aunt Pat's face. She decorated everything so nicely, made all this food, and now she was caught in the middle of this mess. No, I said finally. This is our tradition. I'm not letting them ruin it. Dan nodded. He gets me, you know? Aunt Pat squeezed my hand. Just give me a minute, I said, heading for the back door. Needed some air. It was freezing outside. I hadn't grabbed my coat, but the cold felt good. Helped clear my head. I could see through the kitchen window, everyone moving around inside, looking so normal, like a regular family on Christmas Eve. That's when my mom came out. Didn't even bring a coat for me. Typical. You're going to catch cold, she said. Like she'd been saying that to me every day for the past 8 years. Like she had any right to act like my mother now. I had so many questions. Why now? Why like this? Why not call first? But what came out was, why are you really here? Well, she started doing that thing where she takes forever to get to the point. It's about Jen. Of course it was about Jen. When wasn't it about Jen? What about her? She's going through some changes. I waited. Mom always does this, talks in circles until someone makes her get to the point. Finally, she said, Jen's getting divorced again. I just stared at her. Like, was that supposed to be news? Jen getting divorced was like the sun rising. Happened pretty regularly. And, I said, and she needs some time to rebuild her life, to find herself. Something in her tone made me nervous. What does that have to do with me? That's when Dad came out. Still no coat for me, BTW. He had this look on his face, the same one he had when he told me they'd spent my college fund. Mel, he said, trying to sound all businesslike. You've done well for yourself. Good job, nice house, stable marriage. I didn't like where this was going. At all. I thought they came to apologize or feel some regret. But no, even after all these years, they still want to use me to help Jan. We were thinking, Mom jumped in, maybe you could take Ben and Lisa for a while. I legit thought I'd heard wrong. Take them? Just until Jen gets back on her feet, Dad added quickly. She needs time to sort things out, find a new place, maybe go back to school. I stood there trying to process what they were saying. They wanted me, who they hadn't spoken to in 8 years, to take custody of Jen's kids. Are you serious right now? It makes perfect sense, Mom said, like she was suggesting I water her plants while she was on vacation. You've got that big house, Dan's got a good job, and you work from home sometimes. I work from home like twice a month. Still, the kids would have stability, structure, and Jen really needs this chance to what? I interrupted. Party? Find husband number 4? Mom's face got all pinched. That's not fair. Not fair? I laughed, but not because anything was funny. You know what's not fair? Showing up at Christmas after 8 years of silence and asking me to raise someone else's kids? Dad tried to step in. Now, Mel, Number just no. Where's Jen anyway? Why isn't she asking me herself? Right on cue, Jen appeared in the doorway. She must have been listening the whole time. There you are, she said, like we were all just hanging out. I was wondering where everyone went. The kids were with her, Ben looking sleepy, and Lisa clutching this stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. These are your aunt and uncle, Jen told them, pointing at me and Dan, who'd quietly appeared behind me with my coat. Aunt Mel and Uncle Dan. The kids just stared at us. Can't blame them. Ben's 7, Lisa's 5, Jen continued, like she was introducing her pets or something. They're really good kids, super independent. Ben can even make his own breakfast. The way she said it, like that was a selling point, made my stomach hurt. A 7-year-old shouldn't have to make his own breakfast. Dan spoke up for the first time. This seems like something that needs more discussion. Maybe not on Christmas Eve? Bless him for trying to be diplomatic, but Jen wasn't having it. What's there to discuss? You guys have everything. Big house, good jobs, no kids. It's perfect. I just need like 6 months, maybe a year tops. A year? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Well, yeah. Gotta get my life together, you know? Maybe travel a bit. Figure out what I want. What about their dad? I asked. Jen waved her hand dismissively. Oh, he's useless. Probably in Vegas or something. I had to ask. Which one? Dad, number 1, 2, or 3? Mom gasped. Mel! But Jen just laughed. Number 2? Number 1 moved to Canada, and number 3? Well, that marriage got annulled, so he doesn't really count. I couldn't deal with this. Turned to go inside, but Jen grabbed my arm. Come on, sis. Help me out here. I need this. I'm suffocating. I looked at her hand on my arm, looked at the kids, looked at my parents who were watching this whole thing like it was going to work out just the way they planned. No, one simple word should have been the end of it. After that disaster of a Christmas Eve, I thought things would calm down. Like maybe they'd get the message and leave us alone. Yeah, I was wrong. Jen started showing up at our house. At first, it was just random visits with the kids. She'd bring them over saying stuff like, they should get to know their aunt and uncle. I felt bad for Ben and Lee, so I'd let them in. They're actually sweet kids when Jen isn't around. But then the visits got weird. She started coming alone, always when she knew Dan would be working from home. I didn't think much of it at first. Dan works from home on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I'm usually at the office those days. It was our neighbor who first said something. She's this older lady who lives next door and basically sees everything that happens on our street. She caught me getting my mail one day and was like, "Your sister sure dresses up to visit your husband." I was confused. What do you mean? Oh, you know, always wearing those little dresses when she comes by. Even in this cold. And she stays for hours sometimes. That's when things clicked. All those times Jen just happened to stop by when Dan was home alone, always needing his legal advice about her divorce. I asked Dan about it that night. He looked really uncomfortable, which isn't like him at all. I was going to tell you, he said. It's been getting inappropriate. Turns out Jen had been hardcore flirting with him for weeks. She'd show up in these tiny outfits, always finding excuses to lean over his desk or touch his arm. Dan kept trying to be professional because 1, he's a decent human being, and 2, she's technically his client for the custody stuff we're dealing with. But the last straw? She literally told him, and I quote, "You know, if you ever get tired of the boring version, you could always upgrade to the fun sister." The boring version. She meant me. My own sister called me boring while hitting on my husband. Dan shut it down immediately, told her she needed to find different legal representation, and that she wasn't welcome at our house anymore when I wasn't home. I was furious. Called Jen right away. She picked up all cheerful like nothing was wrong. "Hey, sis! I was just thinking about stopping by tomorrow." "Stay away from my husband," she laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, come on, we were just having fun. Dan's been so helpful with all this legal stuff." "Jen, I swear to God, you're overreacting." Besides, it's not my fault if Dan finds me attractive. I mean, we all know I was always the pretty one. I hung up, called my parents because surely, they'd see how messed up this was. Mom's response? "You know how Jen gets when she's stressed. Maybe if you'd agreed to take the kids, she wouldn't be acting out like this." I can't even make this stuff up. Dan suggested we install security cameras, said we might need evidence of her behavior for what he thinks is coming. He's dealt with enough custody cases to recognize the signs, he said. I wanted to believe he was wrong. I wanted to believe Jen would at least pretend to be a decent mother, if not for herself, then for her kids. But Dan was right. The next morning, we woke up to the doorbell ringing, over and over. Something felt wrong. I got up and pulled open the curtains, and there they were, Jen's kids, Ben and Lisa, sitting on our front steps. No jackets, no gloves, just 2 small suitcases beside them, and Lisa clutching that beat-up stuffed rabbit like it was the only thing keeping her together. I bolted for the door, barely aware that Dan was right behind me. The second I opened it, the freezing air hit me like a slap, but it didn't matter. Ben stood up stiffly, rubbing his arms. Aunt Mel? His voice was too quiet, too resigned, like he already knew he wasn't supposed to expect much from adults. Dan was already scooping Lisa up, rubbing her frozen hands between his. I grabbed Ben's suitcase. It was light, too light. When I opened it later, I'd find just a few shirts, some underwear, and nothing else. Then I saw the note. It was crumpled in Ben's tiny fist. He hesitated before handing it to me, like he was already bracing for disappointment. I unfolded it with shaking hands. They're your problem now. I need to live my life. Jen. I felt the ground drop out from under me. For a second, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process the sheer cruelty. She left them. She actually left them. Like they were some inconvenient baggage she could just dump and forget about. I clenched the note so hard it nearly ripped. I was shaking with rage, with disbelief, with something so raw I couldn't even name it. Dan's voice was tight with barely contained fury. Get them inside. Now. I scooped up Ben, even though he was too big to carry, and slammed the door shut behind us. Jen was gone, and she wasn't coming back. After that, Dan went into full lawyer mode. He's usually pretty laid back, but I've never seen him so angry. He got the kids inside while I grabbed their suitcases. The bags were barely packed, like a couple of t-shirts and some underwear thrown in. Lisa's stuffed rabbit was there, thankfully. She can't sleep without it. We documented everything, took photos of the note, the suitcases, everything. Thank God for our security cameras. They caught Jen dropping the kids off at 4:30 a.m. and driving away in her beat-up Honda. While I was making the kids breakfast, they were starving. Hadn't eaten since dinner the night before. Dan was making calls. Like, a lot of calls. He contacted CPS first, then the police to file a report. Then his law partner who specializes in family cases. My parents showed up around noon. Turns out Jen had texted them saying, "Kids are with Mel now, all good." Like it was totally normal to dump your children on someone's doorstep and disappear. Mom started with her usual excuses. Jen's just overwhelmed. She needs time. She'll come back when she's ready. Dan shut that down real quick. This isn't about Jen anymore. This is child abandonment. It's a crime. Dad tried arguing. But they're family. We can handle this privately. No, Dan said. We're doing this by the book. Those kids deserve better than being pawns in Jen's games. That's when my mom started crying. But if you report her, she'll get in trouble. Yeah, I said. That's kind of the point. The kids were watching TV in the other room, but I know they could hear everything. Ben kept looking over at us with this worried expression. He's way too used to adult problems for a 7-year-old. CPS showed up around 2 p.m. They interviewed all of us, took pictures, checked the house. The social worker was really nice. She talked to Ben and Lisa alone for a bit. When she came out, she looked seriously concerned. Turns out this isn't the first time Jen's pulled something like this. She's left them with random friends before, sometimes for days. Ben's been taking care of Lisa since he was 6. He makes her breakfast, helps her dress, makes sure she brushes her teeth. No kid should have to be a parent to their sibling. We tried tracking Jen down, called everyone we could think of. Finally, one of her friends cracked and told us Jen had bought a plane ticket to Las Vegas. She's apparently moving in with some guy she met online gaming. She didn't even tell her kids goodbye. Dan's filed for emergency temporary custody. Says it's the fastest way to make sure the kids are legally protected while everything gets sorted out. CPS agrees. They don't want to put the kids in the system if there's stable family willing to take them. My parents keep calling, begging us not to ruin Jen's life. They don't get it. Jen ruined her own life. We're just making sure she can't ruin her kids' lives too. Right now, we're waiting on a court date. The kids are staying with us until then. Dan's converted his home office into a temporary bedroom for them. He's amazing with them. Helped Ben with his math homework tonight, and read Lisa 3 bedtime stories until she finally fell asleep. I'm scared, not gonna lie. We didn't plan on becoming parents like this. But looking at these kids sleeping on our couch, how could anyone just abandon them? The social worker's coming back tomorrow. I'll update then. Update 1. Update on the situation with my sister abandoning her kids. Check previous post for background. Quick update on the Jen situation. She's still in Vegas, posting pics of herself at pools and casinos, like she didn't just abandon her kids. Meanwhile, things with my parents got even messier. So CPS called a family meeting yesterday. We all sat down at this big table in Dan's office. The kids were with Aunt Pat, thank God, because what happened was rough. The social worker started explaining how the system works, talking about temporary guardianship and stuff. My parents kept nodding like they were following along, until she got to the part about Jen potentially facing criminal charges. Mom lost it, started crying about how everyone makes mistakes, and she's still their mother. Then the social worker dropped the bomb. Given the circumstances, we need to discuss permanent placement options. Mr. and Mrs., my parents' last name, as the maternal grandparents, you would be the first choice before we consider foster care. You guys should have seen their faces. Dad started stammering. Oh no, we can't. We're too old. We don't have the space. Mom jumped in. Besides, Mel and Dan have that big house. They're young. They have money. It was like watching history repeat itself. Same excuses, different situation. Reminded me of that day they told me they'd spent my college fund on Jen's wedding. Dan, bless him, wasn't having any of their excuses. Actually, he said, pulling out some papers, your house has 4 bedrooms. You recently took out a home equity loan to renovate your kitchen, so finances aren't the issue. And according to state law, as grandparents, you're legally obligated to be considered first for placement. My dad got all red in the face. Now see here, young man. No, you see here, Dan cut in. He never raises his voice, but man, when he uses his lawyer tone, people listen. Your daughter abandoned her children and threw them at us. She's in Vegas spending money on hotels while her 7-year-old son is acting as a parent to his 5-year-old sister. This isn't about what's convenient for you. It's about those kids. Mom tried again. But Mel, stop it, I said. All those old feelings from the college fund thing came rushing back. Stop trying to make me fix Jen's messes. You did this her whole life. Cleaned up after her, made excuses, pushed her responsibilities onto me. Not anymore. Then the social worker cleared her throat. If you're unwilling to take custody, we'll need to document your refusal. This will be part of the court record, and if no relatives step up, the kids will enter foster care system. That got their attention. See, my parents care a lot about what people think of them. It's why they spent so much on Jen's wedding. Had to keep up appearances. Document? Mom looked horrified. You mean this would be on record? Yes, the caseworker said calmly. It will be officially noted that you declined custody of your grandchildren. While it won't be publicly accessible, it will be part of the case file and legal record. Mom's face paled. So, people could find out? If it comes up in court or an official inquiry, yes. And if a family member chooses to share it, there's nothing stopping them. Mom's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. The next hour was wild. My parents tried everything. Guilt trips, crying, even offering me money. Ironic, right? By the end of the meeting, my parents had signed temporary custody papers. They're picking up the kids tomorrow. Ms. T's going to do weekly checks. Dan's made sure they can't just pass the kids back to Jen if she shows up. Everything has to go through the courts now. I feel weird about it. Like I know it's the right thing for the kids. They need stability. But watching my parents do the right thing only because they were forced to brings back a lot of old stuff. Ben asked me earlier if this meant he didn't have to be in charge of Lisa anymore. God, these kids deserved so much better. I don't know how things will move from now on. Let's just hope for better. But I'll keep you guys updated. Final update. Update to the ongoing situation with my sister abandoning her kids. See previous posts. Okay, Reddit. Got a lot to update you guys on. Remember how Jen was living it up in Vegas? Yeah, that didn't last long. Dan's law firm worked with local authorities to track her down. Turns out she was staying at some cheap motel off the strip with this guy she met gaming, not the fancy resort she was posting pics from. She was just hanging around the nice hotels taking selfies and pretending she was staying there. The cops showed up at her motel room on Tuesday morning. According to the report, she tried saying she was just taking a vacation, and the kids were perfectly fine with their sister. The officers weren't impressed. They brought her back yesterday. Not gonna lie, seeing her in handcuffs was weird. She didn't look like the confident sister who'd been hitting on my husband and demanding we raise her kids. She looked small, scared. The charges are pretty serious. Child abandonment, child neglect, from before she left them with us. Child endangerment. Some other legal stuff I don't fully understand, but Dan says are bad. The DA's office interviewed Ben and Lisa last week. They're doing this thing called a forensic interview where they talk to kids about abuse or neglect. Ben told them everything. How he's been taking care of Lisa since he was 6. How Jen would leave them alone for days. How they sometimes didn't have food in the house because she spent the money on herself. Lisa started crying during her interview when they asked about meals. Said she was scared they'd have to go hungry again. I had to leave the room. My parents are freaking out. They keep trying to get Dan to make this go away. He flat out refused. Told them if they try to interfere with the legal process, they could lose custody of the kids too. Mom tried the whole, but she's mentally ill excuse. Yeah, no. Jen's not mentally ill. She's just selfish. Always has been. They're doing a psych eval anyway as part of the case, but Dan says it's standard procedure. The gaming guy from Vegas? Turns out he had no idea Jen even had kids. She told him she was this rich single girl looking for adventure. He actually contacted Dan's office when he found out the truth, wanting to help with the case. Sent screenshots of all their conversations where she bragged about having no responsibilities and being totally free. Jen's not talking to any of us now. Her court-appointed lawyer told her to stay quiet. But she did send me this long text last night. You happy now? You finally got everyone to notice you instead of me. Bet you planned this whole thing. You were always jealous that mom and dad loved me more. Well, congrats. Hope you're satisfied now that you've ruined my life. I didn't respond. What's there to say? She abandoned her kids on my doorstep in the middle of winter. She did this to herself. They even searched her motel room. They found receipts for designer clothes and expensive restaurants. She had money. She just chose to spend it on herself instead of her kids. And yeah, it's been 6 months since everything went down with Jen. The court case finally wrapped up last week. Jen took a plea deal. She's getting 18 months in state prison with possibility of parole after 12 months, plus 5 years probation after release. She also lost all parental rights. The judge wasn't playing around, said something about how the systematic neglect and final abandonment showed a complete disregard for her children's well-being. My parents actually got their act together, which honestly surprised everyone. I think finally seeing all the evidence in court, hearing what Ben and Lisa had been through, it changed something. Mom actually stood up in court and said Jen needed to face consequence. Never thought I'd see that happen. The kids are doing better. Like, actually better. Not just putting on a brave face better. They're still living with my parents, but there's been a complete change in how things work. My parents had to take parenting classes as part of the custody agreement. Dan's idea. He's scary smart about this stuff. They've set up proper bedrooms, got the kids into good schools, and taken them to therapy every week. My parents tried reaching out after everything settled. Dad sent this long email about how sorry he was about the college fund, how he sees things differently now. Mom keeps trying to call, saying she wants to start fresh. But you know what? Some things you can't just apologize away. 8 years of silence, then they only show up when they need something? Nah, I'm done. Aunt Pat's been amazing through all this. She visits the kids at my parents' house regularly, makes sure they're actually taking care of them properly. The kids adore her. They call her Grandma Pat, which honestly feels more right than my parents being grandparents. Jen's in prison where she belongs. She sent me this dramatic letter full of excuses and self-pity, talking about how prison changed her and how she sees everything differently now. Not one word asking about her kids. Classic Jen. It's still all about her. That letter went straight in the trash. Dan and I see the kids every other weekend, but not at my parents' house. We pick them up and take them out. Movies, parks, normal aunt and uncle stuff. Ben asked me last week if I was mad at my parents. Told him the truth, that grown-ups sometimes have complicated feelings about each other, but that doesn't change how much we love him and Lisa. People keep asking if I'll ever forgive my parents or Jen. Honestly, some things you can't come back from. Yeah, they're taking care of the kids now, but only because they were forced to. They haven't changed. They just ran out of options. So, here we are. The kids are safe. They have stability, even if it's not the perfect situation. As for my parents, we keep it strictly about the kids. No personal conversations, no unnecessary drama. Sometimes distance is the healthiest choice. And as for me, well, life moves forward. And oh, I found out that I'm pregnant, and Dan is over the moon. Edit. Thanks for all the support through this crazy journey, Reddit. You guys helped more than you know. Edit 2. Yes, Ben and Lisa know they can call us anytime. We got them their own phones, kids' versions with parental controls, specifically for this. Edit 3. To everyone asking, the cats still love having the kids over for weekends. Ben's actually helping me teach the new kitten tricks. Final edit. This account is probably going dark after this post. Dan says it's better not to have too many details online once everything is finalized. Just know we're all doing okay.